Let's go. At least we all carry the same mission, and we will stand on the same stage as them. The person from the Heavenly Destiny people said. However, Nancy didn't move. She was well aware of this fact. But she didn't want to give up. She wasn't just working for the mission of the Heavenly Destiny people, or just for the guidance of the God's Palace and the opportunity to fight for the future. She also was doing it for everyday commerce. Although she always said that Su Buxian was a hands-off manager, a troublemaker who didn't care about business, but the foundation that everyday commerce had built up to now was all because of the Super Dream Agreement technology diagram he had left behind, as well as the connections made within Xinghe. However, the technology from everyday commerce had already reached its limit, and the various orders at the Spirit King's end were about to collapse. Since all restrictions had been lifted, the Spirit Kings of Sequence 2, no longer the strongest, nor the most controlling entities in this world. They themselves were probably fighting for their own future, watched by numerous eyes for their forces and resources. How could they care about a small everyday commerce? If she could get new support. Nancy looked at those priests and the bell ringer, but she shook her head and sighed painfully, withdrawing her gaze. She was really daydreaming. The most likely possibility was to connect with the Divine Sun, to establish a good relationship. These important figures. Sometimes a single word could either destroy everyday commerce or give it new life. However, it was still very difficult. Her status as a star was worthless in a place that respected power and background. Wanting to attach to them required making contact and piquing their interest. But unfortunately, everyone who arrived here was preparing everything for their identity and points. She had no chance to make contact with the Divine Sun. Yes, the Divine Sun. Other forces couldn't even save themselves. Only the Divine Sun had the power to help everyday commerce rise. Only a pity. She wasn't the only one with this idea. Many leaders from large and medium forces thought the same. Their identity as Heavenly Destiny people was different from most of the others. Others were chosen by the World Tree Withered Leaf from various planets and worlds responsible not to the God's Palace but to the World Tree. While these people were issued by the God's Palace, both were noteworthy since their backgrounds couldn't be ignored, with some of them inherently attached to the God's Palace while others were forces the God's Palace also needed. Can't just take it step by step. It's only that I'm not prepared enough? Nancy softly sighed. In the coming days, if there's still no chance, it'll be trouble. She clenched her fist, feeling immense pressure. After all, from what she could see, she alone was the closest to the top echelons. Other people from everyday commerce, that is, Simon, was still managing various businesses outside. And those she met, like Bai Yilin, were in even more precarious situations. Then there was that guy, Su Buxian. Nancy mentioned the name with clenched teeth. Damn it! Where is he? Just me struggling, that guy. Not even a shadow, even the members of the Hustlers sect he recruited have been left aside. It all looked hopeless, constantly facing the prospect of bankrupting liquidation. What to say, though? At that moment, a voice gently arose from behind Nancy. Talking behind someone's back isn't a nice habit. Nancy's eyebrows slightly raised, her pupils dilated. That voice. She turned around in disbelief and saw that familiar face with an innocuous standard smile staring back at her. Nancy's eyes widened. Su Buxian. Su Qi said calmly, Don't shout so loudly. I have people beside me. Lin Jiang scratched his head. So you two know each other. Looks like you're from the same sect? Yes. Su Qi pulled out a small notebook. I'm his superior. Lin Jiang. From what I see, your power is stronger than his. Nancy knew as a Sequence 6 powerhouse, a star, in terms of identity and power she could surpass many Heavenly Destiny people. After all, many Heavenly Destiny people grew up from native worlds. While Nancy's face was slightly trembling, the astonishment in her eyes still hadn't faded. She would have never imagined seeing Su Qi here. She didn't even know what to say. After all, it had already been nearly a year since they last met. And to appear suddenly, especially when she was speaking ill of him. What are you doing? Nancy looked at the small notebook in Su Qi's hands, which he was currently writing in. You were just speaking ill of your superior. I'm deducting from your performance this year. Nancy rolled her eyes. That was so like him. Hadn't changed at all. There were many things she wanted to ask, but considering Lin Jiang was a heavenly destiny person not in the hustler sect, who knew Su Buxian. So Nancy held back many questions. Right? Su Qi snapped the notebook shut, tossing it into the space of the holy light corridor. You were standing here, like a resentful woman, planning to do something? Nancy, what an analogy. It looks like you want to go there. Lin Jiang quickly guessed. He looked towards the distant platform, where the divine sons, the predestined top forces heavenly destiny people, were engaging with the priests, participating in some detailed strategic plans. Only they could join. Because this was the stage after the burst, not only the strength of each person of heavenly destiny was required, but also their supporting powers. That was where the core group of heavenly destiny people in the God's Palace were located. It was a collection of extensive backgrounds. Don't think too much. Lin Jiang shook his head. We just need to do our own tasks. Nancy also sighed softly. It was indeed the truth. Let's go. They had no need to stay here any longer. He still had many things he wanted to ask Su Buxian. What's the rush? Su Qi shook his head. Since you want to meet them, why not go? He gently said, just like in a relationship, how do you know there's no next step if you don't take that step? Nancy fell silent for a moment. Setting aside how awkward your analogy sounds, you didn't listen to a word of what we were just discussing. Who are those people? Divine sons. Nancy grumbled. Don't you realize the significant status of the divine sons by now? The identity of Lord and Xinghe is big enough, isn't it? Yet, in the shadow of the divine sons, he still doesn't amount to much. He still remembered initially presiding over that massive star conference, where several sons of the Spirit King had nearly driven him to the brink of hell multiple times. Not to mention these genuine divine sons. Each one had a real God supporting them. Okay. Su Qi clapped his hands. If we don't go over, let them come to us. Nancy. He didn't know where their sect hierarch had disappeared to for a whole year, or what had happened. His previous memory was still stuck in Everday City, when the two major gangs in the ruined city wanted him as their spokesperson. Back then, Su Buxian was utterly destitute. Although resourceful, he was still negligible in front of the sons of the Spirit King. And now, it seemed there had been some changes. His strength had risen to 7th rank, normal level. There were 2 new members of the Hustlers sect, who had joined, although he could see that Bai Yilin and Jiang Ji had tremendous potential, and there was Meteor Alliance, which seemed to have some implications in this regard. But such achievements in a year's time, isn't that a bit too leisurely? And most importantly, now, his tone was even bolder than before. Nancy was just about to say a few words. At that moment, the very center over there suddenly quieted down. Nancy paused slightly, feeling a strong sense of oppression washing over him as he looked over. A gaze was penetrating hundreds of meters of distance, looking towards them. It was the gaze of the bell ringer, his expression carrying an authority that couldn't be ignored. Although his strength was restrained, the mere presence of his being unconsciously made everyone feel daunted. At this moment, however, a hint of surprise flashed through the eyes of the bell ringer, for he had already withdrawn his focus and noticed Su Buxian in the distance. Without any hesitation. Boom! The bell ringer's figure flashed instantaneously, disappearing from his original spot, appearing in front of Su Qi. The priests raised their eyebrows. They naturally noticed the bell ringer's movements, somewhat surprised. The bell ringer was one of the main controllers in the God's Palace and also their superior. Such fluctuations were seldom seen in him. The priests unconsciously looked in that direction. But unexpectedly, just as several people who had just appeared in the distant corridor vanished in an instant. Lord Bellringer. How did he leave? The divine sons also looked behind. Those 3 people were taken away by Lord Bellringer? Watching this scene, the priests were puzzled. But then a voice echoed in their mind. It was the voice of the bell ringer. After you finish arranging, meet me on the top floor. The priest's expressions shifted slightly. That was their core territory, not only where they deliberated and made decisions but also where they connected with the deeper forces of the god's palace. It was extremely vital. Gatherings here generally meant making larger decisions, and they had just consulted not long ago. Now, not much time had passed, and it was suddenly starting again? What exactly is going on? Lord Bellringer, by acting this way, must have his profound intentions. We'll know in time, said a priest softly. Also, we need to inform the other district's priests. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Nancy looked shockingly at the space in front of her. The space was clearly a domain, simply furnished with a gigantic bell lying across it. The bell was as large as a mountain, piercing through the clouds, and the surface was covered in various engravings. It seemed to be the bellringer's bell. This was a legendary artifact. Historical records mentioned this bell, which had participated in many great battles and repelled countless enemies from the abyss. She couldn't believe she was actually seeing it with her own eyes. Lin Jiang was also startled as he muttered, "Ancient shocking bell. I can't believe I'm seeing it. I'm really seeing it." Right now, he was utterly bewildered, not understanding what was happening or how he had been brought here. Everything had happened too fast. However, none of that seemed to matter now. What was most important was, both their gazes simultaneously shifted below the bell, where a small pavilion had been built. In front of the pavilion, there was a stone table and stone benches. Bellringer was standing silently by the side, while another person at the table was Su Buxian, who was already sitting by the stone table, and he was now taking out a dish of sunflower seeds, offering them to the bellringer across the table. "Want some?" What was critical was that the legendary figure did not ignore the offer but shook his head. They looked even more shocked. Had they not seen this scene with their own eyes, they would have thought they were going mad. Nancy was particularly flabbergasted. Su Buxian. No, could it be that their sect hierarch actually had a connection with the bellringer? And it seemed like a deep connection at that. "Who are you? And what is your relation to him?" Bellringer actually spoke first, his gaze calmly shifting towards Nancy and Lin Jiang. Lin Jiang hastily raised his hand. "I am Lin Jiang, from the Southern Border Domain, a demon exorcist of the 62 BHJ star in the 214A Galaxy Group, and I met Brother Su, Lord Su, on my journey here." Hearing the term Lord, Su Chi sighed. "I already feel a tragic wall of separation between us." Lin Jiang, who the hell isn't aware that your status is no simple matter now? He must be someone akin to a divine son, or how else could he be sitting face to face with the bellringer? However, Bellringer ignored Su Chi's muttering, his attention turning to Nancy. Nancy couldn't help but tense, although he was a host who had seen many big figures and had gone through many grand experiences as a star. But, facing this legendary heroic-level demigod, Bellringer, he still choked up somewhat. He is love, death, robots host, and a spokesperson for everyday commerce, said Su Chi, quite naturally taking over the conversation. Although he may not have much potential in terms of strength, he is exceedingly adept in many other aspects, currently a member of the Hustlers sect, and of course one of the Heavenly Destiny people. Nancy. His words had been taken over before, and now being involuntarily stuttered, they were snatched again. And the worst part was the description wasn't even enticing. Understood. Bellringer simply nodded calmly. Although the Heavenly Destiny people were certified by the World Tree Withered Leaf and were not evil beings, considering the gravity of the situation, he still needed to confirm the identities of these two men and their connection to Su Buxian. In the presence of the ancient shocking bell, they couldn't lie or harbor deceitful intentions. Su Chi softly said, "All right, stop the interrogation. Sit down. Meeting again, you must have many things you want to say. And I also have many questions I want to ask you." Su Chi's voice came through. Bellringer moved his lips but didn't speak directly. Instead, he slowly took a seat at the stone table. Nancy, witnessing this scene, twitched at the corners of his eyes, his keen sense of perception catching a hint of something. For some reason, at this moment, this legendary figure, Bellringer, seemed slightly guilty. And Su Qi still managed to press down on Bellringer? Tell me why? Nancy didn't understand. Really didn't understand. Everything had turned upside down. It was completely reversed. What on earth had her sect hierarch done? What had he been up to this year? What had he gotten himself into? Waking up, cognition in the present world dropped by 10,000 times? Yet the leader of the Hustlers sect remained normal? But now was not the time for him to be shocked. Because suddenly they sensed a shift in their vision. They were instantly being pulled away from the range of this stone table. The conversation between the two that followed, they could only watch but not hear. Su Qi, however, turned his gaze to the great bell. This bell is the same as the one I saw at the god's palace, capable of resonating beyond the anxious land. But I didn't expect it to be your possession. The bellringer nodded. It is a treasure bestowed upon me by the master of the present world. It has slain countless abyss demons. Can it be borrowed? Su Qi's eyes lit up. The bellringer? No, only I can activate it. That's fine too. Su Qi said softly, not knowing what he was thinking. You should know by now. Finally, the bellringer spoke up. A small part of the will of the god of anxiety has left the seal of the anxious land. The bellringer looked at Su Qi, commanding in presence, but without the oppressive air as before. Why did he treat Su Qi with such an attitude? It was because too many things had happened in the anxious land, and at the center of it all was not someone else but Su Buxian. Not only had he resealed the god of anxiety back into the coffin, but he had also cured several severely ill divine entities from the pantheon of the old days. He had even obtained the power of the master of the present world. No matter which feat, Su Buxian had completely exceeded all expectations. Moreover, he and Doli had come to some sort of agreement after receiving guidance from the Eye of Destiny. They would request all their strength to resolve the anxiety curse on him. Just that, a major change has occurred. The power of the abyss is more terrifying than we imagined. It has opened a fissure in the anxious land, allowing some of the god of anxiety's power to escape. A small part. And that is one of the reasons why I am here. The bellringer sighed softly, one of the leaders of the heavenly destiny people, and slowly spoke, apologizing to Su Qi. I'm sorry. Why apologize? Because they had promised to guard the anxious land well, yet an accident had occurred. And most importantly, the curse on Su Buxian. Even a minor departure of the god of anxiety's power was enough to bring about a terrifying destruction, and its most likely target might be Su Buxian. Plagued by the curse, the chief was approaching with endless resentment. The bellringer didn't know just how perilous a predicament Su Buxian would encounter next, and that was why he was apologizing. Because of their failure to suppress the god, Su Buxian might not have much time left. But Su Qi just smiled faintly. The bellringer was a straightforward person, though a demigod known for his tough methods and authority. He was even more forthright concerning right and wrong. Actually, you're late. Su Qi gently picked up the tea in front of him and took a sip. I've already encountered the god of anxiety before. At this revelation, the bellringer's pupils constricted. How is that possible? What the bellringer said was indeed correct. The primary goal of the god of anxiety upon leaving was himself. It even happened faster than he had imagined, compounded by the backhand left by the curse, leading to an early encounter. There was quite a bit happening before. Su Qi spoke softly. The bellringer's expression changed slightly. If that's the case, those incredible fluctuations from the abyss ceremony, then how did you escape? Escape? You're talking about the escape of the god of anxiety, aren't you? The situation was different now. The various experiences before had already accumulated many trump cards for Su Qi, plus he had understood what would happen next, and he was preparing all sorts of things. Resources, combat power, contacts, etc. All these constituted his current foundation. Just as Nancy had said, it wasn't about taking one step at a time, but Su Qi was just preparing for the future. The Hustlers were a solitary war chariot just setting out. It's just that Su Qi had bound many people onto this chariot. Even Su Qi had taken an interest in the bell ringer and the great bell behind him. The bell ringer watched Su Qi, unsure of what the other was thinking at this moment. He couldn't see through Su Qi, who had managed countless feats that many couldn't, stood out from a host of trialists with his outrageous strength and managed to push the god of anxiety back into the coffin. Originally, their plan was merely to let the god of anxiety control half the layers. They tried to delay as much as possible, but who knew it would be forcibly suppressed. Moreover, most importantly, he had gained the power of the master of the present world. The Eye of Destiny's prediction about him was unclear, and even without the world tree withered leaf, he still entered the domain of the heavenly destiny people. Wait, you're not one of the heavenly destiny people? The bell ringer suddenly startled. Why don't you have the world tree leaf on you? Can't I be one of the heavenly destiny people without a leaf? Su Qi interjected. I believe everyone with dreams is one of the heavenly destiny people. The bell ringer stood up. This ceremony is to block any hidden abyss spies. The core of the probe, if you could enter without being detected even without the world tree leaf, then that means the abyss might also be able to. Su Qi watched the bell ringer's brisk manner, as if he was about to initiate a major internal cleansing at any moment. All right, easy, easy, Su Qi said softly. It's not a problem with the ceremony. It's just that the ceremony can't stop me, you understand? What kind of entities I've been in contact with. Bellringer gazed intently at Su Qi. His words were loaded with meaning. However, since Su Qi remained silent, all he could do was speculate. This included how Su Qi had encountered the god of anxiety earlier and how he had safely reached this place. So, Bellringer spoke slowly and seriously. The contact you mentioned, is it related to the master of the present world? The master of the present world is indeed the highest leader in the god's palace, a mighty being comparable to the evil god, who has led countless eras and is directly connected to the current situation of the present world. Most importantly, these priests, as well as the deities of the god's palace, have been unable to establish contact with the master of the present world for a very long time. It seemed as though the master of the present world had vanished without a trace and was not in the depths of the old days. The only one who had contact was... Bellringer looked at Buxian, who was cracking sunflower seeds. The obscure and unclear power bestowed by the master of the present world, the Eye of Destiny, led Bellringer to harbor various speculations about Su Qi. What can I say? Su Qi watched the question mark hover over Bellringer's head and slightly smirked, barely noticeable. Your guess isn't far off. Bellringer widened his eyes. So you mean, you've had contact with the master of the present world? Do you have any clues about him? Su Qi neither denied nor confirmed. I can't reveal too much. After all, the master of the present world is in the unspeakable forbidden land. The more you know, the more you might. The next moment, Su Qi grunted. A terrifying, ominous aura burst forth from him with intense density. Bellringer's pupils sharply contracted. Ominous, and so thick. Ominous, originating from the old days, is a horrifying substance from contact with the forbidden, typically feared and avoided by many, and under normal circumstances, those less than extraordinary wouldn't even come close to it. But the ominous contained within Su Qi had already surpassed a level that the extraordinary could withstand. With this, the words of Su Qi just now seemed to be true. He really had had contact with the master of the present world and possibly possessed his clues or other information. And there was nothing unusual about Hong Zhong behind him. The other party was not lying. Su Qi, seeing the question marks coming thick and fast over his head, remained expressionless, but internally he was delighted. He had absolutely no contact with the master of the present world, nor any trace of him. But that's not important. Out in the world, identity is self-proclaimed. And most importantly, Su Qi could feel that there was a hand secretly manipulating everything. And he seemed to be in it too, even though there was no malice. He also didn't like being passive. Given that, Su Qi could also make use of this layer. Bellringer, I see. Even though Su Chi didn't know what he understood, Bellringer did not continue to inquire further. So, Su Chi gently said, "What are your subsequent arrangements? I'm not referring to what was discussed at the meeting." He gently tapped on the table. "I mean your real objectives." Su Chi now, instead, transformed his role, no longer as a person of heavenly destiny or as an acquaintance, but as the spokesperson for the master of the present world. After all, according to Bellringer's words and the information on his head, he was now the only person who had come into contact with the power of the master of the present world. The main thing was the asymmetry of information. Bellringer hesitated slightly. He represented the current leader of the God's Palace, but in reality, there were also the deities of the old days and the guidance of the Eye of Destiny behind him. The decision-making of the God's Palace had a grand will in the background. He paused. "As you should have noticed now, Heavenly Destiny people, Venerable, these are factions born from our confrontation with the Abyss, but their role goes beyond that. As the current deity's power is only a projection, they need vessels to descend. The vessel for the Abyss is the countless Venerables. These Venerables can accommodate various powers above the extraordinary, demigod demons, priests, bishops, even the deities of the Abyss. And so is the case for us. Heavenly Destiny people will also accommodate the power of our God's Palace when the time comes," Bellringer softly narrated. Su Chi raised an eyebrow, so that was it, much more detailed and expanded than he had previously understood. No wonder the gathering after the meeting was mostly divine sons, because they inherently possess divine bloodlines, better accommodating their own God's power behind them. Among them, the Heavenly Destiny people who accommodate other divine powers will also be selected later to pick the best among them. The most important thing is not these powers, but the most powerful forces on both sides. The Bellringer said softly, "The evil god of the Abyss is seeking a venerable who can withstand its power, and we are also looking for someone who can carry the power of the master of the present world." Su Chi asked, "So have you found them yet? With the guidance of the Eye of Destiny, it should be easy, right?" The Bellringer shook his head, and since the conversation had already started, he no longer hid the truth. "Currently, there are only 10 candidates, and as for the guidance of the Eye of Destiny," the Bellringer paused, stretched out his hand, and gently pointed in midair. "You should know the Eye of Destiny is the power of the master of the present world. Just as you have described all taboo, limited by this point, much information is presented as riddles and metaphors. For this, we even have a special decryption department." Su Chi gave a thumbs up. "Professional." However, regarding the person destined to carry the master of the present world's power, we still haven't fully deciphered it. "So, what kind of riddle has stumped all you professionals?" The Bellringer didn't speak. Instead, the projected screen in front of them changed again, displaying 3 cards. Each had different backgrounds and inscriptions, reading respectively, "Foolish God with no limits," "Pitiful One," "Enemy of all," "Well-connected person facing all winds." Su Chi said, "These 3 answers. Well, they're quite abstract, aren't they? But there were various images in the background providing guidance, so it wasn't just words. And, looking at it, it somehow resembled oneself quite closely." He paused. "So you're making progress, right?" After all, the Bellringer had just used the word complete, indicating that they had some leads. The Bellringer nodded. The next moment, the screen changed again, displaying a statistical chart with numerous identity portraits. "This has been compiled by our decryption department, based on various pieces of information, a list of potential matches. About how many? 215,600 people." Su Chi said, "Isn't that the same as making no progress?" "No choice." The Bellringer shook his head. "These 3 pieces of information, combined with the images above, cover a very broad range. Like the first foolish god, too many people disrespect the gods in their hearts. It's hard to narrow down to a small group." But, the next moment, the statistical leaderboard changed again. "We also have a probability ranking." The updated portraits on the screen were reordered. All the top 10 had probabilities of over 10%. Are these the candidates you mentioned earlier? The bell ringer nodded. These are all God's sons and meet the criteria above. Su Chi paused. And if we don't find the right one in the end? Then we'll have no choice but to pick one of them, to carry the power of the master of the present world, to suppress the power of the evil god. These individuals were not lacking, capable of enduring it, and possessed inherently strong and unparalleled combat capability, but the guidance of the Eye of Destiny was to find that one existence, and the bigger the percentage, the greater the chance of success. I see. Su Chi seemed to understand quite a bit. All right, let's hold off on that for now and start discussing the issue of compensation. The bell ringer? I know. It was my dereliction of duty in guarding, said the bell ringer softly. And now your predicament has arrived ahead of schedule. The god of anxiety will always be watching you, so you indeed deserve compensation. Whether you need protection, resources, or anything else, feel free to speak up. I will compensate you. Su Chi snapped his fingers. With your promise, I feel much more at ease. Now I'll state my demands. That was quite unreserved. The bell ringer steadied his breath, mentally prepared that Su Buxian would make huge demands, as he had done before when leaving the anxious land. But there was no choice, as his own side had faltered, and additionally, it was because his Hongzhong could detect lies other people told, because it could hear various sounds emanating from a person. And just now, he had tried listening to Su Buxian's voice. That moment, towering death energy and countless horrifying screams nearly made him lose his composure. Su Buxian was now laden with a heavy death aura. It was as if one foot, no, his entire body was in hell, with only one finger clinging to the outside straw, preventing him from being dragged into hell. So, whatever Su Chi demanded, he intended to fulfill it as much as possible. I want. Su Chi paused, then uttered 3 words, backdoor entry. The bell ringer looked at Su Chi, slightly stunned. Backdoor. Su Chi spoke swiftly and clearly. You know, I lead the Hustlers sect, and many people need an opportunity, a stage. Each one of them is excellent under my leadership. They just haven't had the chance to shine. The bell ringer raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected Su Chi to ask for resources or assistance in terms of strength, nor even to address the crisis he was facing at that very moment. Unexpectedly, it was for his own power, for his members, seeking to secure opportunities for them. Did this guy possess some great righteousness that he had not noticed before? I understand. The bell ringer slowly began. Although during my term at the God's Palace, I severely prohibited any backdoor dealings and even purged a large number of priests who profited from such actions. But now, indeed, I have a major lapse. A flaw has appeared in the power of the God's Palace, and indeed it is a form of compensation. Acting on behalf of the God's Palace, I can offer you support. It wasn't easy for him to relent, given that the bell ringer's prestige was built upon the execution of order, representing impartiality and justice. The figure all looked up to that exposed, deceitful, and slippery people. But at this moment, his brow suddenly raised, as Su Buxian had a sincere, harmless smile, but something in his heart gave a thump, smelling a bit of something amiss. I indeed need support, but it might not be what you're thinking right now, Su Chi said with a smile. What do you want? The bell ringer slowly began. It was indeed a huge demand, but it wasn't a problem. The God's Palace was in the process of recovery. Many things from the past, relics, temples, etc., were all re-emerging. Resources were sufficient, even far surpassing current needs, as currently everyone entering here was below the extraordinary. No matter how many resources were available, they would be overwhelming for the sequencers at this level. Yet, Su Chi did not ask for resources. Instead, he gently suggested, rather than giving a man a fish, teach him to fish. No amount of resources, equipment, or items can substitute for allowing them to obtain these things with their own hands. I've said before, they need an opportunity headed towards the future, not everything right now. The bell ringer's expression changed slightly, things seeming a bit beyond his expectations. Even now, he couldn't see exactly what Su Buxian was thinking, but he had a foreboding feeling. making him unavoidably feel a sense of unavoidable anxiety. He slowly spoke. "What is this opportunity you speak of?" He did not continue promising, as he already sensed that Su Buxian's next words might not be simple. The next moment, Su Qi, with a smile, gently opened his mouth. "According to the actions you just described concerning the god's palace, whether it be high-sequence extraordinary individuals, demigods, or even gods wanting to descend, someone must bear their strength. So you should have a list." Su Qi paused, enunciating every word. "It's the list of candidates for the descent of the power of the god's palace." The bell-ringer's pupils visibly constricted. The next moment, "Help me get in the back door." Su Qi's voice gently reached his ears. "I want their names on that list too." The bell-ringer's eyes involuntarily widened. He had expected Su Buxian to make huge demands, but he hadn't expected them to be this ruthless, not just seeking a backdoor entry, but the most crucial part. "Impossible." The bell-ringer's voice rasped sternly. "Absolutely impossible. Other matters might still be negotiable, but this one, right?" Su Qi had anticipated this but did not seem rushed, still leisurely pouring water, brewing the tea, and handing over the cup. "However, I think there's room for negotiation." The bell-ringer's face remained stern, simply blocking with the cup. "Sorry, this matter is non-negotiable. Su Buxian, you must understand. This is not just any list, but our defense against the abyss, deciding the future course, determining the fate of the present world's countless life. A war where a single misstep could mean total loss. How could there possibly be any room for backdoor dealings?" The bell-ringer's voice boomed like a great bell, carrying endless authority. Every word struck like a heavy hammer. His presence demanded respect without anger. Spiritual force burst forth explosively. "I will never agree to this." Su Qi stared at the bell-ringer standing beneath the giant bell. His pupils glinted with a cold, hard light that brooked no invasion, an unquestionable aura that would make anyone feel guilty and dare not harbor any crooked thoughts, including Nancy and Lin Jiang in the distance. They immediately stood at attention. What's going on? Such a powerful and terrifying spiritual force. What has Su Buxian done now? Nancy's eyes widened. Although they couldn't hear what was being said, the changes in facial expressions were crystal clear. Clearly, the bell-ringer seemed angry. This terrifying spiritual force was inherently invisible and colorless, but now one could see ripples emanating from him. Even standing far away, they could feel a sense of suppression and force. And at that stone table, Su Qi calmly sipped his tea. The rumbling impact of the spiritual force whipped up winds from his motion, buffeting his sleeves. Yet he remained completely undisturbed. Even though he possessed no spiritual force, for some reason, no matter how powerful the forces were, they failed to oppress him. This was exactly like the ability of the entertainer profession, being calm and composed in the face of all threats. The ability of one's identity and profession could be extended to later stages and even be retained and integrated into their sequence. That is why so many people were frantically increasing their points and elevating their statuses. "Don't get agitated." Su Qi took a gentle sip of his tea. "If you cannot accept the term backdoor dealings, I can phrase it differently. This is a future business tender. The Hustlers Sect's future special services, providing support to counter various forces from the abyss. After all, professional matters should be handled by professionals." The bell-ringer looked at Su Qi, his expression calm and unflustered. "You mean, you're the professional?" Su Qi raised his arm, revealing a curse on his forearm. "What do you think? I acknowledge that you've accomplished what others couldn't, but this involved the power of the master of the present world of the anxious land, and the protection of master of the present world, which is of utmost importance." The bell-ringer stated emphatically without bias. He did not deny Su Qi's ability. After all, the god of anxiety had been forced into a coffin, an unprecedented feat. But claiming that the Hustler Sect is a professional team against the abyss was a bit. "What about this then?" Su Qi stretched out his hand. His weapon, Dark Star expelled a massive amount of rumbling chaotic liquid, covering all sorts of weapons and equipment densely packed around him, forming a sea of chaotic weapons. The power of the god of chaos. The complexion of the bell ringer changed slightly. He immediately recognized the extraordinary nature. And it has been tamed. This was an extremely special situation. He paused, then quickly reacted. The dark star on you has a special power, doesn't it? It can devour chaos. Su Chi snapped his fingers lightly. Yes. If there were more chaotic liquid, I could continue to devour it. Is this enough? The bell ringer's expression shifted again. Dark Star was a special weapon that grew with its owner, a situation that had never before occurred. Should one praise the weapon as magical or acknowledge that Su Buxian, its owner, was special? He still calmly said, "You still do not understand. The power of the abyss is not something that this chaotic liquid can compare with beneath the colossal." Su Chi stretched out his hand again. What if I add this? The originally serious face of the bell ringer could not help but raise an eyebrow at this point. More? And his gaze shifted to what appeared to be a simple tube of blue potion. What was this? A flicker of confusion crossed his brow, wondering what use a mysterious blue potion could be. Yet Su Chi gently swirled it. The next moment, boom, boom, the bell ringer's pupils narrowed as an astonishing surge of blood energy burst forth into the sky. Majestic phenomena of heaven and earth formed in this space. Furthermore, the projection of the blood demon appeared with a thunderous roar. A spiral akin to a gene's, the Star River, was also among them. The power of the Lord of the Blood Demon. The bell ringer was genuinely astonished as he watched the scene. His dignified eyes unavoidably showing change. Chaotic liquid had, in fact, already disseminated in the present world like a plague, just like the power of pollution. But the power of the Lord of the Blood Demon was different. After all, the Lord of the Blood Demon was still buried in the old days. Its power had not yet burst forth in the present world. Not even a trace. How did you manage to obtain this? He could feel the surging power within, which was far from trifling. Take a guess. Su Chi merely smiled mysteriously. To secure a future advantage for the Hustlers sect relied on Nancy. Such thoughts of clinging to the Divine Son were definitely not enough. First, to gain the upper hand, showcase the bargaining chips, and take a seat at the negotiation table. Ancient Gate. The bell ringer was no fool. With his broad view, a mighty demigod of legend, he immediately guessed this point. There lay various old worlds, connecting and suppressing countless ancient beings, and it was normal to have various remnants of power. But his expression was grave, not as dismissive as before. Because obtaining the power of the Lord of the Blood Demon was as difficult as reaching the heavens, let alone the power involved within. That was not ordinary. So, are you reconsidering my earlier proposition? Su Chi spoke softly. The bell ringer did not respond this time because, in that instant, he actually hesitated. Su Buxian, a mere sequencer, had managed to obtain so much power from the abyss, though it might be due to various coincidences or special protectors. But indeed, it had truly shocked him. I can offer 10 spots. The bell ringer finally relented, seeming to have made a significant decision. Su Buxian had shown his chips. He had to admit, the other party seemed to truly possess various means to counteract the abyss's power. After much consideration, he decided to make an exception. But Su Chi shook his head. That won't do. The Hustlers sect. Although it can't be said to be obscure, it can also be said to have made no achievements. So everyone needs a spot. But don't worry, there aren't many people. Su Chi spoke softly. Just 200 or 300. Of course, I don't need a quota for the descent of gods. Some demigods, sequence 1, sequence 2 will do. You're still being picky. The bell ringer's expression shook, his veins involuntarily bulging. The quota for the descent of gods is less than 100. The others added up are just a few thousand. You alone want hundreds. Such a huge demand. If it had been anyone else, he would have burst out swearing. Don't get agitated. Su Chi snapped his fingers. I have another item. The next moment, another aura emerged from Su Chi, and this time, the bellringer's face finally changed drastically. His pupils contracted sharply. His pupils were incredibly shocked as he saw a pattern suddenly materialize on Su Chi's body. The totem of the evil god. A high-level item only venerables possess. Are you a venerable of the abyss? He was somewhat at a loss for words, as everything that had happened had completely exceeded all his expectations. Su Chi spoke gently. Don't look at me with those eyes as if I am an enemy. In the next moment, an aura of the world tree leaf suddenly burst forth from his body. I can be a heavenly destiny person, or I can be a venerable. But now I am, Su Chi said with a gentle smile, the hierarch of the Hustlers sect. And at this moment, what I propose is not a demand, but a trade. Using the detailed plans and deployments of the Abyss and the Venerables, in exchange for 300 spots for the Hustlers sect. What on earth happened? Lin Jiang was a bit dumbfounded, standing at a distance, having watched from the beginning to the end. Even though he was shocked that the newcomer he had just met turned out to be a super well-connected guy, who could even be linked to the bellringer. But now it seemed he might have been wrong again. The two didn't seem to have a parasitic relationship, but rather were communicating as equals. While Nancy was even more shocked, his surprise had not ceased from the start. Did he not understand his own sect hierarch? From the very beginning when he first served as a host, this guy had often been surprising, but now, it might be a bit too beyond his imagination. He and Simon had developed the everyday commerce to this level, and he was still wondering if Su Buxian would be surprised. And now he found that his own sect hierarch appeared to have left everyone else in the dust. At this moment, their vision became distorted. Boom! They only saw a burst of blood red before they even knew what was happening. They were sent out of the domain and returned to the auditorium. We've been sent out? Nancy didn't reply. He was stronger than Lin Jiang, but he had seen a shade of black, still bursting out from Su Buxian. What exactly happened, and why did Su Buxian know the bellringer? Now what were they discussing? There was nothing to do but wait. I sent them away. You have the evil god's totem, a venerable's mark on you. This matter is dangerous and must not be disclosed, or those who witness it will encounter the horrifying god of the abyss. The most terrifying power, spiritual pollution, the bellringer said in a hoarse voice. I didn't feel it, Su Chi said with a light laugh. And besides, don't I also have the god of anxiety's curse? A bit more pollution doesn't bother me. You seem to have special means to reduce the pollution, the bellringer said in a grave tone. But don't underestimate it. That's the evil god, even just a totem will have the most direct connection. So anything of its is taboo. Su Chi stroked his chin. So that's how it is? The evil god's power polluted everything. Anything could trigger an eruption of the evil god's power, like how he, back in Linyuan land, nearly summoned an evil god's projection by transforming into a sheep head. The same happened in Night City, and in this town where through the sheep head's totem, he also reached out and got the evil god's eyeball. This was the horror of the evil god, but it also started Su Chi on his first pile of gold. The god of anxiety, although cruel, is just a subordinate of the evil god. The evil god, like a forbidden taboo that cannot be looked upon directly, is the source of misfortune and strangeness, the bellringer said calmly. Even though you have resisted the god of anxiety, it was only a minuscule fraction of its weakened power. You cannot imagine how terrifying the evil god really is. So, this is also why we have always been searching for someone who can take on the power of the master of the present world. The bellringer warned Su Chi with a tone full of utmost severity and immense fear. Su Chi said with a light smile, All right, got it. Now let's get back to the matter at hand. With all that said, you must have made your choice by now. Silence fell in the air, as the bellringer's expression steadied, and he gave an answer. I will explain it to the other main affairs, and your hustler's sect, based on what you've just said, seems to be dispersed. Before the battle day in the town, you better gather them all together. The bell ringer said calmly, because at that time, everything begins. Su Qi slowly appeared in the spacious auditorium. At this moment, the priests and the heavenly destiny people's divine sons had already scattered. The entire auditorium had been sealed, and the ceremony was shut down. I've waited long enough. Not only had he reached various agreements with the bell ringer but also confirmed the list, and handed over the full meeting records and recordings of the abyss to the bell ringer. Yes. He had also recorded the event. Xiaoming's camera silently captured everything without being noticed. Apart from that, Su Qi had received numerous other pieces of information from the bell ringer. For example, it wasn't just the forces of the abyss and the god's palace resuscitating ancient high-sequence extraordinary beings and demigods. There was also the chaotic camp, and a large number of divine beings, demigods, and ancient entities were resurfacing from the chaos of the old days, divine race, various forces, races, powerful sequences, and even outer gods, all having powers that wanted to descend. And the most crucial aspect was what they were competing for. It was the world tree source that erupted during the world tree's blooming. The owner, even if possessing a mere strand, could establish a shrine on their sequence path and collect the power of faith. This was key to becoming a god. The withered faiths of the past, the world now required rebirth. And this blossoming power was catered to the new generation, which was also why countless people fought for it. Although for the abyss and the god's palace, the world tree source could bring forth more powerful new generations, they didn't need it as much anymore. Their ancient essence was already counterbalancing. Their main goal was still to win this war. Moreover, although the bell ringer was quite candid in his communication, seen under a question mark from Su Qi's perspective. However, Su Qi still had many things unrevealed. The spiritual eyes, the yellow-robed master's robe, angel bloodline, immortal path, fantasy country, starfire, and so on. If this opportunity yielded a favorable outcome, it would provide a strategic advantage for deeper collaboration in the future. Su Qi had already planned everything. The Hustlers sect should appear openly this time, exposed for the world to see. Then, strategically withdraw to launch various versatile businesses and acquire the resources needed for growth. However, this was predicated on being able to safely retreat. It was a risky gamble, but Su Qi found it worth taking. Su Qi walked out towards the hall. At this moment, the bell ringer had returned to the palace for a meeting. There was half a month left until the town's slaughter day. According to the bell ringer, that day would not mark the beginning of a slaughter but the start of a real war. By then, it surely wouldn't be just about plundering identities. Su Qi pushed open the grand doors of the hall and gazed towards the mountaintop, at the world tree root stretching into the Star River, standing there unopened. But it was undoubtedly the center of everything, and something would happen then. Now, Su Qi paused suddenly and turned to look beside the hall. At this moment, Nancy was waiting right here. Su Qi smiled. Nancy, have you been waiting long? Where is Lin Jiang? He seems to have been called away by his family. Is that so? Su Qi touched his chin. He and a friend of mine named Jeline are quite similar. The same costume, and a sequence like ninjutsu. Nancy gave Su Qi a meaningful look, full of emotions of reunion as well as shock and complexity about what had just happened. Let's not talk about that for now. Can you tell me what's going on? Times had changed. This guy was no longer the young fellow who had struggled in games during their first encounter, though it seemed he hadn't really struggled even back then. Now he was completely inscrutable. How should I put it? Su Qi patted his shoulder lightly. The bell ringer owes me a huge favor, so he agreed to see me this time. Nancy raised her eyebrows. What kind of favor could make an eminent being, whom everyone else viewed from a distance but dared not approach, suddenly appear and pull them directly into his domain? Like in Xinghe before, he also did not know how Su Buxian managed to connect with the Spirit King's son. But this guy was sometimes just that astonishing. Seeing that Nancy wanted to keep asking, Su Qi gently said, "You're working hard for the everyday commerce to find a way out and make connections. I'm doing the same, except with different goals." Nancy looked slightly moved. "So, We've made connections with the bell ringer, huh? More or less, Su Chi said softly. It should be said now that the Hustler sect had connected with God's palace. Nancy, upon hearing a definitive answer, couldn't help but get excited, her eyes wide. Is the everyday commerce saved? What do you mean saved? Have some ambition, will you? Su Chi said calmly. Didn't I tell you when I invited you to join? The Hustler sect is destined to command respect across the universe. Caught between excitement and skepticism, Nancy couldn't help but retort. Back then, I knew you were just fantasizing. Now, it seems there might be some substance to that fantasy. Just some. Su Chi smiled and said, Let's go. Where to? Nancy paused. Let's find and gather the rest of the Hustler's sect members. Nancy bowed her head and thought, By Yilin and that kid named Jiang Ji, right? Su Chi. The members of the Hustler's sect are more numerous than you imagine. Is that so? Nancy mused to herself. How come I heard from them that there are only a few? However, Nancy also sighed. It seems now like you've been hiding them. Not exactly. Su Chi started counting on his fingers. The official ones seemed to be just a few indeed. Su Buxian. Nancy widened her eyes. Relax, Su Chi said with a gentle smile. Let's go find them first. Nancy took a deep breath. So, gathering means preparing. After all, everything has a price. If we want their support, Su Chi softly continued, then we need to prove our strength. Nancy was taken aback. How do we prove it? By gathering. We will prove it with the formidable potential of the Hustler's sect. Demons, bishops, demigods, and even gods from the abyss are nothing in comparison. Nancy was still pondering and muttered to herself, Formidable potential. Huh, you know what, Bai Yilin and Jiang Ji indeed possess great potential, and if you count the Meteor Alliance behind them, it's indeed feasible. Wait, what did you say at the end about are nothing? Nancy suddenly reacted sharply. Abyss? And all those suffixes. He pointed fiercely at himself. Us. Su Chi just smiled slightly. Yes, we are going to fight the upper echelons of the abyss. This isn't an opportunity just anyone can get. Nancy gaped. Nonsense. Generally, only the most powerful heavenly destiny people get such opportunities because others simply aren't qualified to participate. Did you see in that hall just now? Tens of thousands of people. Only a little over 100 people had the qualifications to join. The fatality in this. Seeing Nancy's somewhat agitated demeanor, Su Chi interjected nonchalantly. So, you understand how rare this opportunity is. There are over a dozen jurisdictions for the heavenly destiny people, continuously hosting various meetings. The number of these people is greater than imagined, but not many get on that list. Nancy's eyes hardened. When he thought about it, it was indeed a precious opportunity. From the very start, he had seen it. Setting the divine sons aside, countless major powers were desperately showcasing themselves, hoping to gain the priest's favor. The aim was to secure that qualification. Yet still, many so-called major power young masters were left outside. They just wanted one slot to join, but still found it hard to compete. It seems indeed like an opportunity, Nancy said solemnly. Su Chi softly stated, just like when you became a heavenly destiny person, without sacrifice, how can you welcome the future? So that's it. This was your request to the bell ringer, I understand now. So how many slots do you have? Who are you planning to send? Nancy pondered. After all, these positions were extremely precious. Even the top major powers could only secure about 5. Su Chi waved a big hand. This is a team-building activity for the Hustler's sect. Naturally, everyone is going. Nancy? He didn't complain about how grandiose Su Chi's statement was. Instead, he just massaged his forehead. I now understand why the Hustler's sect doesn't have many members. Su Chi remained smiling but silent. Let's go. In this enormous demon town, finding someone is not so easy. After all, Every step involves various rule restrictions and passing through different jurisdictions. It's not that simple and easy. Jiang Ji should be with Anan and Qinxing, that team, and could be contacted through the Starfire chip, so there's no rush. However, Bai Yilin was currently unreachable. On Old Huang's side, Su Qi looked at the message from Gan Wensue and the location of the Holy Light Mark. On the other side, Su Qi raised his head, looking towards the majestic palace giant mountain. This was a circular pyramid structure where identity determined which levels one could access. It would require a big detour to gather from the outermost edges. Might as well raise his own ranking first. Let's go take a look around, Su Qi said softly. Increase our points and rank up while we gradually gather the rest. Now it was about traversing various jurisdictions, maybe really having to pass 5 levels and cut down 6 generals. Nancy nodded, but then hesitated. But I still have the action mission from the Heavenly Destiny people. The priest mentioned it in the meeting before. I've already given the heads up. Su Qi snapped his fingers. Hustlers don't need to follow meeting directives, but they can still grab the resources. Also, remember that we are now partners on equal footing with the Heavenly Destiny people. Even if necessary, Su Qi slightly smiled, a small totem of Hongzhong manifesting in his hand. We can directly report using the bellringer's name. At that moment, Jiang Ji, who was in another jurisdiction carrying out various professional tasks, suddenly paused and shivered all over. What's wrong? Anan noticed his unusual behavior. Jiang Ji rubbed his forehead with his hand. I don't know. I just had a feeling that a great disaster is coming. As if something big is about to happen. Su Buxian, he muttered unconsciously. Anan sighed lightly and patted his shoulder. Don't worry. Brother Su won't have any problems. They had realized since their arrival that they and Su Buxian were separated. And now 5 days had passed. Still no trace or sign of him. Even attempts to contact him using Starfire chips were unsuccessful. It's not him I'm worried about. Jiang Ji rubbed his brow. It's just that I'm worried. Something big is coming. Anan was a bit puzzled. You haven't been in contact with him as long as I have, so naturally you don't know. Jiang Ji complained. The scariest thing about Brother Su isn't when he's in front of you, but when he disappears. Because often at such times, you don't know what kind of surprise he will bring you. Anan raised an eyebrow. It can't be that exaggerated. He paused suddenly, remembering the time he had spent in the Holy Light Corridor room, where he also faced the shadows of the old days directly. It really might not be. But there's no need to worry. The frequency channel left by Brother Su on the Starfire chip is very useful. If he shows up nearby, we will know. Anan said softly. Jiang Ji nodded. Let's continue to advance our status first. We must improve our ability levels. At this moment, they were in the jurisdiction of the team that included the sons of the divine race. It must be said that the divine sons' methods were extraordinary, as even here, their influence was preparing, having even taken over a jurisdiction. This allowed them to comfortably increase points. Both of them had risen from E to C level, and after jumping 2 levels they could approach the roots of the world tree, where the palace was located. The radiance emanating from there allowed those who drew closer to benefit more. And the improvement in status also gradually revealed its other importance, one of the key points being that those holding holy artifact fragments could better activate the power inside, and even unleash astonishing might. They were now in the territory reflecting sea-level status, where ordinary adventurers were much fewer, and there were many medium and small forces or well-known powerful adventurers. At that moment, Qinxing's figure slowly appeared at a street corner, his body showing signs of battle, and his jade token slightly dimmed. Next to him was Qi, who was even more pitiable, already seriously injured, and walking with support, his body covered with various wounds. Mr. Chen? Anan and Jiang Ji immediately stood up. What happened? They were now on the same front, and along the way, they had exchanged information and supported each other as traveling companions. But they hadn't expected Qinxing and Qi to end up like this. First, take him to get treatment. Jiang Ji immediately took over Qi, while Anan, as a divine son, was familiar with Qinsheng. His status was somewhat similar to Aqi's, or even not as good. After all, a member of the Hustlers sect could not compare to a protector of a divine son. Anan looked at Qinsheng. What happened? Weren't you transporting goods to another jurisdiction? Qinsheng's role was that of a courier, but his ability was not ordinary. He could arrange transports. Qinsheng patted the dust off his body, his expression cold. When a jurisdiction is controlled, there will be rules restricting it, but many places are not controlled and the bindings of the rules tend to weaken. So, there will always be people with certain intentions. After all, the rules of this current town were the withering power remaining from the old world tree, which, as time passed, would naturally weaken. Anan's expression shifted slightly. Other divine race sons teams? Or the Abyss? Those who would attack someone like Qinsheng naturally weren't ordinary. Qinsheng responded calmly. Both. There are the Abyss and the divine sons. They are already killing without restraint, disregarding the rules, becoming lawless. Things are starting to get chaotic. You all need to be careful when doing various things next. At least this place is under the divine son's jurisdiction. Still somewhat safe. But other places can't be said for sure, especially since the higher the status, the weaker the rule restrictions. Anan's expression became slightly tense, and he nodded. I'll be mindful. Now, this place was mixed with dragons and snakes, various forces, confrontations between the Abyss and the heavenly destiny people, and many complex and intertwined contexts of the divine sons. As time went by, the chaos would only increase. It's already been 5 days, and it won't be long until the town's combat day. Qinsheng clapped Anan on the shoulder. Better prepare early. Qinsheng headed toward the temporary outpost in the jurisdiction, which was also rented using points. Though temporary, it had quite a few benefits. No disturbances, and they could recover from injuries and restore spiritual energy. Anan took a deep breath. Here, preparing early wasn't really about the town's combat day, but about preparation for when the world tree blooms and numerous powers spring up like bamboo shoots. As for preparation, he had none at all. Going deeper into this place had cut off his and his fellow outer world adherents, the followers of his father, the wind god, from making contact. Currently, he also had no idea what arrangements Brother Su had made. By then, how he and Jiang Ji would stand their ground was anyone's guess. I hope I'm not pushing a duck onto a perch. I've actually had a lot of questions along the way, Nancy said, clothed in a carry-on and wielding a pair of pliers in her hand. Why do you do nothing? Yet the light on your jade token is still brighter than mine. Why do you seem to be exempt from following so many rules? Su Qi said, Because I am good. Do you believe I could pinch you to death with these pliers? Nancy retorted. Su Qi replied indifferently, I do have one question, though. Why would a big star like you have the identity card of a garbage collector? I'm not a garbage collector. I'm a janitor. Nancy glanced at him. The quality of people here is truly appalling, mountains of garbage everywhere. On the flip side, it allows me to rake in a ton of points and advance my identity even faster. Hard work pays off, one of the very few advantages of this town. Nancy's pliers picked up some fruit peels and tossed them into the basket on her back. And you still haven't answered my questions, she added. Su Qi gave her a peculiar look. Who works in their own house? He walked away, leaving Nancy dumbfounded. Of course, in reality, it was because of the Leisure Seeker identity card. 5 days passed. Not even halfway through the first day, Su Qi accumulated 100 points and upgraded to a D-level identity. And then the requirements and abilities for advancement changed. But this time, Su Qi also advanced rapidly, reaching C-level by the end of the first day. This rate of terrifying promotion put him in a league of his own, not needing to amass various resources or take on part-time jobs, etc. Now, on the 5th day, he had already successfully advanced to A level. The speed was absurd, so much so that he felt it was abnormal. And it was just a day's journey to S level. Originally, Su Qi thought reaching it within 10 days would have been good enough, and he planned to look for various ways to earn points. but now there was no need. However, at this rate, Su Qi raised an eyebrow. It seems S-level might not be the limit, and various abilities were still locked, seemingly requiring a certain number of points and a certain level of advancement to unlock. But Su Qi wasn't in a hurry. On this path of advancement, just letting nature take its course was fine. The key was the current strategy. During these 5 days, Xiao Meng had once again procured new blueprints from the core of the heart of divine weapon. It was new equipment. The ether energy battle suit could absorb energy from the void. Although its strength wasn't great, it could serve some auxiliary functions. Although it wasn't very useful for current battles. But for him, the value was immense. Auxiliary. This was the aspect Su Qi valued, as the Hustlers sect needed to grow stronger, and resources were extremely important. Whether it was spirit coins or other things containing spiritual energy, they weren't something one person could easily accumulate. Business had to expand, this product had wide applicability, and without overly high barriers it was ideal for widespread promotion. And most importantly, Su Qi could embed Starfire chips within them. Nancy was still sighing as she picked up trash. Stop sighing. Su Qi glanced at her. It's just picking up trash. I think a big star should do more of this. Get a bit of a grounding. Nancy gritted her teeth. I'm effing thinking of what's behind everyday commerce. Although you've made connections with the bell ringer, without new merchandise, this kind of support won't last long. He was worried. After all, everyday commerce had developed along with him. Now that the issues behind were resolved, it was time to address the problems ahead. These troubled times were not like before. The weak products likely wouldn't draw attention anymore. You could sell some of your merchandise, Su Qi muttered to himself. Damn it, are you trying to disgust me? Nancy's eyes widened, at a loss for words. This guy was getting out of hand. Don't worry, I'll arrange everything later. Everyday commerce, as the economic sector of the Hustlers sect, will naturally receive full support, Su Qi said gently. But later you and Simon will still need to train a bit. What are we practicing? Courage, Su Qi said with a laugh. Don't get cold feet whenever you face a situation. After all, many business deals may require you to negotiate in person, and you represent the face of everyday commerce. Oh! Nancy rolled her eyes. You can doubt my strength, but not my professionalism. Before there was everyday commerce, I was a host who had presided over various major events and had seen all sorts of people far stronger than me. Besides, do you think I wasn't the one negotiating deals for everyday commerce as it grew to what it is now? All right, Su Qi gave her a thumbs up. With someone as professional as you, I suddenly feel at ease. Because while products are one aspect, the clients Su Qi does business with are mostly those fixated on the recovering divine beings. Just think about it. The revival of each divine being is not just a matter for themselves, but also involves their backers, families, worshippers, and numerous worlds. To return to their former glory isn't so simple. And this is where Su Qi sees a good business opportunity. The Hustlers sect. The business they'll specialize in the future mainly concerns these aspects. A commerce guild that sells all sorts of unique products wants to spread Starfire across the present world, following the market. Another objective is the special operations targeted at the Abyss, mainly for the sinking markets, or those worlds on the brink of collapse. Generally speaking, many worlds need a shrine sanctuary to prevent invasions, but establishing a shrine requires a cost, a continuous consumption of various resources. So, usually, no one places them in the lower worlds because the people there cannot offer any value. However, Su Qi has a different idea, seeing this as a broad category. Of course, the cost is to combat the Abyss, but that is also Su Qi's purpose. The third line of business is the Holy Light Corridor and Xiao Meng, of course, and will also rely on the strength of Xiao O. But that's still far off, so let's not talk about it for now. Let the Hustlers sect first survive on this stage. Even Su Qi doesn't have any certain victory at the moment, since there are so many unknowns. Of course, Su Qi also has lots of trump cards prepared. It's like playing a game of Fight the Landlord, you just don't know who has the better hand. There seems to be a commotion up ahead. Nancy, while picking up trash, passed through various districts. And it's not a small commotion. We should be leaving the jurisdiction now, be careful. His expression grew slightly serious. After all, he still had the identity of a heavenly destiny person, and if there were abyssals, there could be all sorts of deadly danger. And now that the rules have weakened, increasing one's identity allows using points to offset the restrictions. This has led to many ruins from battles on the roadsides, even the presence of fresh blood. No worries, let's go. What if it's someone we know? Su Chi said indifferently. How can there be so many familiar faces? Besides the abyss, you know people there too. Nancy retorted. That's really not certain. Su Chi chuckled softly. The two walked toward the area ahead, where the light instantly became much darker, and only the quiet footsteps remained in the air. The reason they sensed activity was because the aura lingering in the air hadn't dissipated. And the further they walked, the more intense the aura became. Nancy frowned. Be careful. Although it's not yet the city slaughter day, ever since it became known that the higher the identity jade, the more powerful the holy artifact fragment, the fighting has already begun. Besides high-level holy artifacts, there are plenty of holy artifact fragments scattered outside. It's normal for people to want to gather them. And up ahead is the lawless place, where the rules are at their weakest. I've already seen it. Su Chi looked towards the distant area. Despite the fog, he could see various battles going on, with incessant bursts of fluctuation. And it looks like I do see a familiar face. Nancy was startled. Another familiar face? He looked over and now saw the fluctuations coming from that direction. His eyelids twitched violently. No. Amid the terrifying aura filled with divine suns, which one is your acquaintance? They approached once again. To reach the next place, they had to pass through here. It was unavoidable. Nancy's identity promotion also required her to reach a higher area of the junkyard, to sort the items in her backpack into the right category. Su Chi noticed it too. The various professions in this town paid much attention to the progress bars and paths, as the town was built around the mountain, with all the roads connected, then circling up layer by layer to the highest point. And all the professional tasks would arise along the way, with increasing difficulty and rewards. It was hard not to associate this with the sequence path. So that's the end. Su Chi's gaze turned toward the world tree route, whether it was this town or the sequence path. Su Chi was currently unable to enter his own sequence path. He had only been invited there when he was being promoted. It was said that only when one reached the extraordinary level could they enter the sequence path on their own. Whoosh! Though they were standing far away, there were still boulders shooting over at them, propelled at immense speed, the friction producing a screeching sound as they hurtled their way. Su Chi dodged by tilting his head. We are already over 3 kilometers apart. Nancy's eyes tightened. 7th rank strength? Can't do this. Now, every strong person here shows signs of breaking through sequence 6. Nancy looked at the town. However, there are still rules that constrain them for now. But as previously mentioned, the restrictions were weakening, and the burst of their strength, breaking through the 7th rank, was only a matter of time. And now, they could see the terrifying waves of power over there. Nancy raised her eyebrows slightly. This is no small disturbance. It's a major battle between various forces. Aside from the outbursts of the divine suns, a large number of powerful adventurers were also facing off below. They seemed to be fighting over something. That is. Nancy's gaze suddenly shifted, focusing on the center of the entire field. In the vast center of the area, there shone a dazzling object, floating in midair. It took the form of a book. High-level holy artifact. Before, high-level holy artifacts only appeared at the entrances of each passage, and occasionally they would also appear within the town, leading to various conflicts. The more holy artifact fragments that appeared, the more people realized that they seemed to be related to various professional tools. There were maids' handkerchiefs, cleaners' brushes, novelists' pens. Many trades were represented, which they thought fit the town's rules perfectly. However, Su Chi realized at a glance that these were the possessions of the residents of Killing Demon Town. Aside from their true identities as killing demons, they also had their own superficial professions. Using their things to suppress them? Su Chi understood that these holy artifacts carried the intent of suppression, and at the same time, their appearance signified that the suppression's restrictions were being breached. Those who had once been killing demons, now converted into demons by the evil god's power, were slowly recovering. At the same time, Su Chi also noticed the intertwined power of the old world tree roots in the town was increasingly withered, while the new roots of the world tree at the center were flickering with light. Boom! 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 At this very moment, a large clearing had formed in this massive area, originally filled with many buildings, but now, all had been leveled to the ground. The forces within were many, the people below were trying to approach the high-level holy artifact, but it seemed that the holy artifact contained a spiritual impact. As people neared, they would turn pale, clutching their heads in pain, and be forced to retreat. And the divine suns in the higher skies were already tentatively engaging in battle, the impact from the earlier clashes between the divine suns causing great power. At present, at least 30 divine suns were gathered here, and for the time being, they had not erupted into a do-or-die battle. Instead, they stood coldly, some sneering, some with dark expressions, all exuding various auras in a standoff. Can you feel it? Nancy watched the scene unfold, the powerful spiritual force emanating from their bodies. It's causing a remarkable fluctuation. Su Chi nodded. Indeed, spiritual force is a good thing. It caused no tangible harm, but it was filled with a powerful presence, able to suppress ordinary adventurers and deter various dangerous forces. This was also why many low-level sequencers, upon seeing a Sequence 6 being, would unconsciously feel a fear as daunting as a chasm. Moreover, spiritual force played a significant role in the shrine, of course, provided one owned a shrine. By the way, who was the familiar face you mentioned earlier? Nancy couldn't help but ask, looking at the current scene. There, on the other side, Su Chi looked toward the circle centered around the high-level holy artifact, and the crowd on the other side. Adventurer. That made sense. In addition to the more than 40 divine suns in the Sky Dome, many adventurers had been following the divine sun's forces, so he wouldn't be too surprised about a familiar face here. Who is it? Nancy looked for a long time but didn't see anyone particularly powerful. A cunning and deceitful guy. Someone I knew before I started out. Started out? Nancy's eyebrows raised. You mean around the time I met you? He clearly remembered that back then, Su Chi had not even stepped onto the sequence. You should rank after animals. Question mark. I've met him 3 times before. That's not exactly familiar, Nancy retorted. Well, if you think about it, we've only met 3 times ourselves so far. Nancy fell silent because everything Su Chi said was true. She had left a very deep impression on him from their first encounter. The second encounter had her bound to the ship of the Hustlers sect. This was the 3rd time, and it looked like she was about to be coerced into doing something she didn't even dare to think about. So you and your acquaintance have had similar experiences. The first time we met, we had a pleasant trade. The second time we met, he said I made a deep impression on him. The 3rd time we met, we reached some kind of cooperation and trade. Nancy was startled. What trade? An item, Su Chi said with a smile. Something very important to me, and all I need to do to obtain it is to complete one task. Step onto the final stage. Nancy was somewhat confused, but he understood the last sentence. The final stage referred to the stage when the world tree blossomed. But this person, it sounded like they were not on the same level. Seemingly an extraordinary figure, since Su Buxian herself knew how to take the initiative with anyone and easily fall into their trap without realizing it. And this person seemed different, either much more exceptional or possessing immense strength. However, how could such a person appear among this crowd? Let's go say hello. Su Chi stepped forward. Wait, we're going over there now. Can't we just avoid this place and slip away quietly? Nancy's eyes widened. They were in the midst of a confrontation after all. But he had no way to stop him. After all, he was the sect hierarch. He gritted his teeth and followed. At the center was a high-level holy artifact, and within a kilometer radius of it, people formed a circle, unable to get close easily. Many were attempting to enter this kilometer range, their spiritual power howling, causing those who did enter to show pained expressions with blood flowing from their orifices. Yet, everyone was persevering, gradually moving closer to the high-level holy artifact, but once they crossed a certain distance they were sent flying. Make way, make way. But Su Qi, at a few hundred meters distance, simply strode forward, unaffected among those attempting to approach, crossing directly along the shortest path. Some people noticed Su Buxian, their eyes narrowing slightly. Although that wasn't the closest position anyone had reached the high-level holy artifact, everyone was moving toward the center, except for this person who was passing through. Sect hierarch? However, just as Su Qi was heading to the other side, a voice with a tremble and surprise suddenly reached the ears of Su Qi and Nancy. Oh! Su Qi paused. Although he often called himself the sect hierarch, this was the first time someone had called him that in public. He looked over, raising an eyebrow, because the person calling him the sect hierarch was a stranger, someone he didn't recognize. Who are you? The person became excited. Are you really the legendary sect hierarch? I am one of your followers. He nearly couldn't help but kneel down. Su Qi raised an eyebrow, and a surge of force prevented the man from making such a conspicuous move. The man before him, although young in appearance, exuded tremendous strength, standing out among adventurers, vaguely embodying the aura of a 7th rank, indicating he wasn't far from that sequence. Su Qi thought back. He didn't recall having such a quality, yet unimpressive, follower. Nancy looked suspiciously at Su Qi's expression. Seemingly realizing something, he looked at the man. What is your name? Are you a member of the Hustlers sect? My name is Chang. He touched his head in shame. But I'm not a member of the Hustlers sect, because I have not reached that qualification yet. To join the Hustlers, the minimum requirement is 7th rank strength, and one must also possess super strong potential. So, I'm really working hard now. He raised his fist and swung it with force, looking very determined. Nancy? The Hustlers sect is so awesome. Su Buxian is hiding things from me again. He suddenly paused because he noticed Su Qi looking up at the sky. You're wondering too? Huh. Realizing Nancy's gaze, Su Qi paused without any embarrassment and smiled at Chang. Members of the Hustlers sect are spread across all realms. Chang. Keep up the good work and you'll join us sooner or later. Thank you, sect hierarch. He trembled with excitement. I never imagined I'd see you here. To receive your praise is the greatest honor of my life. As Chang spoke, he attempted to kneel. Su Qi calmly pressed down on his shoulder, and Chang, despite being at the 7th rank, half-stepped to sequence 6, couldn't budge and failed to kneel. Instead, he was ecstatic. Sect hierarch truly is unfathomable. Just as I said, the Hustlers sect has a wide distribution. I'm curious to know which division you're from. Su Qi asked gently with a smile. To tell the truth, he really couldn't remember. I'm from Star Cluster number 56. Chang quickly answered, listing a series of star cluster prefixes. Finally, he mentioned his world. From the constant star system, number 24, from a world called Lonely Star World. Su Qi didn't remember anything from this, but names weren't important. It was what came next that mattered most. You personally saved our world and left behind a divine artifact. The glory of the Hustlers sect you founded is managed by the 3 star gods, which gave us hope and changed our world. From then on, we were free from shackles and continued to grow. So, here comes the question, said Su Qi. These 3 star gods, Star-Suppressing God, Calamity Star God, Knowledge Star God. Chang replied with excitement and took out a shadow-storing stone. These 3 great beings are my idols. I always have their merchandise. Su Qi's gaze followed, and in that moment, He finally understood. So it was them. Nancy raised an eyebrow. Is this abnormality? Because although the three figures had humanoid forms, the star-suppressing god had a snake's tongue, the calamity star god had crocodile's claws, and the knowledge star god still retained the legs of a spider. Abnormalities were also among the vast groups in the present world. They were various non-human life forms that had gained spiritual wisdom and stepped into the sequence. These three have the strength of sequence 6, Nancy immediately judged. Some have already transformed into human form, but to fully shapeshift, one needs to step into the extraordinary. And it seems you already know who they are. Nancy looked at Su Qi, who by now had a radiant smile. Indeed, they are important subordinates of my hustlers sect. Bullshit. You didn't know anything half the time, and now they're the most important. Su Qi truly couldn't help but smile brightly. He really hadn't expected that the group of kids from the orphanage would actually grow up and even promote the legacy of the hustlers sect. That orphanage back then. He had led Snakehead Man, Croc Brother, and Spider Boy, all of them under the age of 10, as they overthrew the cruel rule and conspiracies of the headmaster and staff. And that was also when he began to formally spread the hustlers sect, even though he had mentioned it before in the city of Night Demon Srilon. But that he had merely thought up on the fly. Who could have guessed it would turn out like this? So where are they now? Su Qi looked to Ah Cheng. The leaders of the hustlers sect are now. Ah Cheng pointed upwards. In another jurisdiction, collaborating with several other forces, I believe. He scratched his head. And the rest of us from Lonely Star are scattered in different places, striving hard, hoping to achieve results and join the hustlers sect. Su Qi's eyebrows moved slightly. How many of you came this time? Reporting to the sect hierarch. 100 people. Where do you stand among them in terms of strength? I am one of those at the lower middle level. Ah Cheng scratched his face, somewhat embarrassed. Su Qi's expression hadn't changed much. Next to him, Nancy took a deep breath, her eyes showing some shock. She could tell that Ah Cheng was out of the ordinary. After all, she too was a superstar of the 10,000 realms who had seen all walks of life. And Ah Cheng before her, with his aura and potential, surpassed all the strong adventurers around him, was someone who was seriously on the verge of breaking through to the 7th rank. Yet such a person had plainly stated that he was just one of the middle to low level among the 100 people of the hustlers sect in the Lonely Star world. Was she having hearing problems? Or was the reality before her eyes too magical? But Su Qi raised his eyebrows, showing no surprise. After learning the other party's identity, he quickly reviewed all his memories. The timeline of the orphanage was set a long time ago. Even before he had entered the sequence, it had been continuously developing. Of course, under normal circumstances, a world couldn't possibly develop so fast. The youngsters from Lonely Star were like riding a rocket, their growth skyrocketing insanely. But don't forget, they bore the pseudo-blood of the abyss. At the beginning, the old director gathered all his strength and spent countless years in ancient tomes, striving to transform himself into an immortal being. He offered a ritual towards the abyss in exchange for a blessing. But instead of using it on himself, he allowed countless children to inherit it, and then he established an orphanage to gather those children who had become abnormalities due to the power. Then he harvested them year by year. It was just that his original plan was disrupted by Su Qi's sudden arrival. Nevertheless, their growth rate remained terrifyingly fast. Inside, there might be the power of the evil god. After all, the power of the evil god permeated every totem associated with it. Their bodies were carefully cultivated by the old director. But there must have been other reasons it couldn't be so simple. After the instance ended that time, he left immediately, and he didn't know much about the abyss, so he must have overlooked a lot of things. These would have to wait until he met those 3 people. However, it seemed, the quota he asked the bellringer for might not be enough. He was indeed too kind-hearted, having only asked for 300 slots. But it didn't matter. He would just have to find another way. Let's not argue over the high-level holy artifact for now. Ah Cheng, come with me. Ah Chung immediately responded excitedly. At your command, sect hierarch. And he turned to Nancy. This gentleman, he is one of the ministers of my sect, Nancy, and he is the leader of your 3 star gods, Su Chi said with a light smile. Understood, Ah Chung shouted. Lord Nancy. Nancy felt strange. In that orphanage instance, there was the key figure, Sheephead Dean, who inadvertently left some strong powers in that world that even he wasn't aware of. Moreover, besides himself, there was another important character. And this person was the familiar acquaintance Su Chi had just mentioned to Nancy. Long time no see. Su Chi looked at the white-haired middle-aged man standing behind the crowd, who looked like just another onlooker. Looking quite ordinary with no fluctuations on him. Even seeing Su Chi greeting him, he showed a blank expression. But Su Chi had already draped his arm over his shoulder, smiling. Stop pretending. Do we know each other? The white-haired middle-aged man's face grew slightly colder, trying to break free, but found that Su Chi's grip was tight. He gritted his teeth, showing some anger. I'm just a follower in the Divine Sun team. If you don't let go soon, I'll shout. Go ahead, shout. With so many prying eyes, if you shout, I will too. Su Chi said lightly with a smile. I'll shout that the traveling merchant is here too. Let's see who gets a bigger reaction. Nancy watched the exchange between the two, feeling perplexed. This was Su Buxian's acquaintance? But it seemed as though he wasn't very familiar, not just not very, but completely unfamiliar. But he didn't speak, after all, who knew what Su Buxian was thinking. However, between the conversation, Nancy's eyebrows twitched slightly. He heard Su Chi mention traveling merchant. He frowned, a strange sense of familiarity surging in his heart. He seemed to have heard the title somewhere, but he couldn't remember. The white-haired middle-aged man still furrowed his brows at this moment. What are you talking about? What traveling merchant? I don't know you at all. That's when others too noticed what was happening here. Several middle-aged companions looked on with cold gazes, their hands gripping their weapons. Who are you? Let him go. Finally, Nancy couldn't help but speak up. Brother Su, could you have made a mistake? But Su Chi replied with a calm smile. I might mistake others, but the traveling merchant, I definitely won't. He counted on his fingers. Even though this person moves mysteriously, changes ceaselessly, and likes to make contact with people in the name of traveling and fate without leaving any trace, invisible to anyone. I've even made a bet with him that if we met again and I recognized him, he would owe me a favor. But I've always believed that he's not a deceitful and untrustworthy merchant. He has his own principles and values honesty. Even if he loses the bet, he would acknowledge it openly and graciously. Nancy caught the sarcasm in Su Chi's tone and also saw that the white-haired middle-aged man's expression was growing increasingly wrong. Could it be? And the next moment, the white-haired middle-aged man suddenly shook off Su Chi's hand from his shoulder. His eyes changed, and he looked deeply at Su Chi, then stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers. The companions originally prepared to defend him now looked as though they had fallen under some spell, turning their heads in confusion, as if they had forgotten everything that had just happened. The silver-haired middle-aged man slowly turned around, patted the dust off himself, and no longer had the bewildered look, but just calmly stared at Su Chi and hoarsely asked, How did you figure it out? That question comes with a fee, Su Chi replied with a mysterious smile. The silver-haired man also smiled faintly. Su Buxian, you've grown faster than I anticipated. But I'm not going to pay for that question. Although I don't know how you figured it out, I want to know. The figure of the silver-haired man began to flicker. What you found is just one among millions. Su Chi said, Leaving so soon? We haven't caught up yet. Heh? The silver-haired man just smiled lightly. Now is not the time. So, what are you actually doing? Su Chi asked softly. Millions of disguises, moving among them, without leaving a trace. As the silver-haired man vanished in the blink of an eye, he left behind a faint statement. The change in destiny, everything has a chance. I am making investments, but as for what specifically I am investing in, you can't understand yet. When you can stand on that stage, I'll tell you. Fine? Suchi watched as the silver-haired man disappeared in the blink of an eye. He sure runs fast. That was the method of the traveling merchant. Various disguises, clones, spread across many worlds, quietly guiding them to birth various genius-level beings capable of saving the world. Suchi had always been aware of this, discovering through the various question marks and traces atop the traveling merchant's head. The traveling merchants quietly executed actions. He probably didn't expect that Suchi had already seen through his objective. The so-called investment was to change various destinies. For some reason, it seemed that the traveling merchant could not change things directly, but only through this covert, indirect, and troublesome disguise. If he appeared in his true form, he would engage in trade with those he encountered, with trades adhering to strict rules of fairness and integrity. Thinking of this, Suchi narrowed his eyes. Rules? Once again, rules? He hadn't felt it before, but now, with enough experiences and knowledge, he would find that rules are the basis of many things, whether it's the present world, the abyss, or even the old days. And Suchi had a feeling that the traveling merchant and the black and white bear were kindred spirits. Traveling merchant, oh traveling merchant, Suchi said with a smile. This time I'll definitely strip you down to your underpants. Boom, boom, boom. At this very moment, the battle at hand was on the verge of erupting. The standoff between divine sons had also ended, and various fights were breaking out. The crowd below also began to fight fiercely. The high-level holy artifact was flashing faintly. It was beginning to lose balance, the moment when restrictions were weakening. Everyone wanted a slice of the pie, starting to fight over it furiously. So intense, everyone seems to be seeing red, Suchi commented lightly. Couldn't be because of the high-level holy artifact's screech, could it? That high-level holy artifact, he had recognized it at first glance. Wasn't it the prayer book used by Old Priest? No, Old Bildenback in Killing Demon Town? Nancy spoke softly. The value of the high-level holy artifact itself is enormous. It's normal for people to become bloodthirsty, moreover. Do you see, up until now no one can get close to it, not that they can't, but they can't unless they're absolutely confident. Otherwise, even if someone gets it, they will face being attacked by countless others. The competition and battle here were simply too fierce. As it drew closer to the town's day of killing, chaos escalated. Tisk, Suchi mused. They can't kill like this. In this chaotic situation, instead of uniting to prepare for the upcoming turmoil, they're engaging in futile fights here. Nonsense. Men die for wealth, as birds die for food. It's nature, Nancy retorted. Are you suggesting you can make them stop fighting and work together? Impossible. Don't say that. I actually do have a way. Suchi snapped his fingers. I don't believe it. Nancy shook her head. Ah Chang, do you believe it? Ah Chang straightened up. I believe in the sect hierarch unconditionally. You see the commitment there, Suchi earnestly said to Nancy. Being from the same sect of the hustlers, your thinking has a problem. Nancy, challenged by Suchi's words, was so frustrated her veins throbbed, clenching her teeth. If you manage to do it, when it comes time to fight the abyss, I'll be in the vanguard. Suchi smiled faintly. You said it, huh? Nancy really didn't believe it, wondering how in such a heated battle Su Buxian could turn hostility into friendship and get everyone to cease fighting. And the next moment, Nancy suddenly paused because he had realized that while talking, Su Buxian had disappeared. And then, in another blink of an eye, Su Buxian's figure had already appeared beside the high-level holy artifact. Nancy's eyes suddenly widened. Although he did not know how everyone had struggled to reach this area, and how Su Buxian had zipped right over, he seemed to have an idea of what Su Buxian was planning to do now. Gentlemen, Suchi said with a smile, I found a high-level holy artifact. It seems to want to follow me. He stretched out his hand and suddenly grasped. The book was directly in his hand. Everyone's expressions froze, looking at this scene because everything happened too fast. Damn, it's too strong. Suchi exclaimed in shock. Gentlemen, I'm being dragged away. At this moment, Su Chi's entire body, along with the book, shot toward Chang and Nancy at an arrow's speed. Run! Nancy's eyes bulged. Su Buxian, you bastard! And at the same time, numerous dangerous auras and killing intents surged explosively. Without any hesitation, Nancy gritted his teeth and, along with Chang, followed Su Buxian. They both burst forth with spiritual energy and started to run away like mad. The faces of the divine sons darkened immensely. If someone had really taken the high-level holy artifact, they wouldn't have been so furious. But the self-directed act from the other party had now left them feeling humiliated. They waved their hands in command, "Cut them down!" Furthermore, the divine sons did not hesitate at all, halting the pointless battle. They erupted with spiritual energy and all chased after Su Buxian and his companions. The intense battlefield killing had turned into a fierce chase. Su Buxian! Nancy couldn't help but shout as he sprinted. "You son of a... Look, have they stopped fighting?" Su Chi said with a chuckle. "They have indeed stopped. They've come together with a common goal, haven't they?" "Indeed." Nancy spoke through gritted teeth, but his voice did not stop Su Chi's monologue. "At this moment, I feel I could win the Nobel Peace Prize." "Is that important?" Nancy roared. "Think about how we're going to get away now." "Don't panic." Su Chi spoke softly. "I think I've sensed some members of the Hustlers sect. They're in the next area, about 10 minutes away." Nancy growled. "I don't care who it is. Just don't drag others down with you at a time like this." "How can that be? Isn't our goal to gather the members of the Hustlers sect?" Su Chi said with a mild smile. He looked ahead, where a starfire chip was shining brightly in his line of sight. In fact, as soon as he had approached the vicinity of the high-level holy artifact, Su Chi had sensed it. Moreover, he knew who it was because that starfire chip was the one he had asked Shandian to give to Bai Yilan. That guy would definitely be happy to see him. Furthermore, Su Chi watched as information collected at the starfire end continued to trickle in. So that's how it is. Bai Yilan had joined a team and, together with the Meteor Alliance, made it all the way here. This team was quite remarkable, composed of powerful adventurers, and their backgrounds seemed to be quite significant. 2 children of the divine race? 2 sons of the divine race? Then don't mention it. That seems really impressive. After all, just 1 son of the divine race can easily create a divine son team, gathering a massive amount of power and followers. 2 sons of the divine race joining forces is even more remarkable. The key is, these 2 sons of the divine race, I seem to have seen a familiar face among them. Isn't that Xiao Bei, a prospective member of the Hustlers sect? Su Chi looked at the figure of Bei Xinqing, a smile curling on his lips. That guy is indeed a son of the divine race. Su Chi was not surprised, for as soon as Bei Xinqing appeared, he recognized his extraordinariness. Whether it was his background, his own divinity, or the sequence he controlled, all completely different from others. At this moment, where Su Chi spoke about 5 minutes ago, approximately 30 to 40 kilometers ahead, the atmosphere was also very tense. In front of a massive gate, numerous prestigious forces were gathering, each of them well-known and powerful, some even protected by Taoist guardians with divine sun totems. "See that?" Beside him, Lin gently spoke. "All notable individuals or powers, each one at a galaxy level of strength. The Hidden Killing Association. Behind them is said to be a demigod. The Bright Sect, with divine beings as their background. Zone 9, a terrifying race that has emerged from the cosmic restricted zone. General Yu listed these forces one by one, as he excels in gathering all sorts of information. Moreover, as various situations evolved, the backgrounds of these forces also gradually surfaced, and many understood why they stood at the pinnacle of power. It's all because they all have backgrounds that terrify countless people. All these terrifying forces with powerful backgrounds were now visiting this tightly closed gate. The sons of the divine race, truly an insurmountable chasm. Bai Yilan spoke softly from a distant edge. Background, immensely powerful. Others have one divine being standing behind them. But the divine race has a whole group of divine beings not at the same level at all. And these two sons of the divine race are an extremely terrifying and powerful presence even among the divine race. Most importantly, the two of them did not form cliques or alliances like other sons of the divine race, directly amassing a vast camp. Thus, this also presented an opportunity for many to see, attracting numerous people to flatter and cling on, hoping to gain the attention of the two sons of the divine race and stand with them on the final stage. They believed that even divine sons would not easily reject the power of forming an alliance, as after all, they too had to face competition equally fierce from other sons of the divine race's camps, now rivaling each camp's foundation, multifaceted strength, resources, and even connections. Yet progress till now was slow. The two sons of the divine race were unpredictable, and their thoughts differed from ordinary people, especially the terrifying spiritual force within them, making everyone who stepped through that gate tremble with fear. They possessed the true posture of the mighty. You sighed softly. Even when I see the extraordinary, my heart never felt such a tremendous pressure. The more this was so, the more they felt their talented pride shattered, the more they felt powerless. Bai Yilan, noticing the somber mood among the people, softly said, "Someone once told me, would the proud scions of the divine race prefer to die on their feet rather than live on their knees?" They also mentioned 30 years on the east bank, 30 years on the west bank of the river. Don't belittle the youth. Wait, those phrases sound so familiar. Was the person who said this surnamed Qian or Xiao? No, his name is Su. Such blatant plagiarism. Bai Yilan couldn't save face and cleared his throat. That's not important. Brother Su's meaning is simple. The future's fate is unpredictable. We must not undervalue ourselves. Even in chaotic times, we are never unable to control our own destinies. Although Bai Yilan's motivational speech made sense, the spirits of the people were indeed not high, and who could say they hadn't tried, investing all efforts and exertions. But in this place, effort was often ineffective, the gaps between individuals larger than the reproductive isolation between people and helicopters. That's exactly what the sect hierarch of the hustlers said, right? Lin gently spoke. We also understand by now that we are a group of self-proclaimed geniuses who are overconfident yet lack broader perspectives. So, Bai Yilan, we've decided to join the hustlers sect. Lin looked at Bai Yilan with a serious expression. Bai Yilan looked slightly surprised. Really? He hadn't really persuaded the people much, but unexpectedly, they had now made their decision. Since you trust the hierarch of the hustlers sect so much, Bai Yilan, we naturally trust him too. And after many experiences here, why maintain that ridiculous persistence? Lin gently shook his head. Let the hustlers sect become our brotherhood's new starting point, a fresh beginning. This time, you patted Bai Yilan on the shoulder. Let's together let the hustlers sect flourish. Bai Yilan was overjoyed. He finally had his brothers fall into the pit. No, get on the bandwagon. Wrong again. Cough, officially willing to join the hustlers sect. And then, a voice suddenly arose from Bai Yilan. That won't do. You are still prospective members, needing evaluation, completing the intern tasks I have set now. Lin and the others were taken aback, looking towards the bracelet that formed from flickering starlight on Bai Yilan's wrist. Bai Yilan was even more stiff. Brother Su? Although he didn't know how Brother Su could suddenly speak through Starfire. But, are you kidding me? I was about to succeed. And you're still increasing the difficulty. No problem. We are willing to take on this internship task. Frost seriously agreed. Now that they were aware, they had to be humble, devoid of any genius's arrogance, only solemn and resolutely determined. Okay. A voice came from Su Chi's side. It's a simple task. About a minute from now, there will be around 30 people arriving within your line of sight, and all you need to do is one thing. Unleash all your strength and try to block them as much as possible. Su Chi's voice calmly conveyed. Block them for as long as you can. The next moment, Su Chi seemed to go offline again. All our strength? Try to block? 30 people? A young member of the Meteor Alliance paused. Aren't they underestimating us a bit too much? And treating us like tools right from the start? Another person slightly shook their head. Bai Yilan spoke. Trust Brother Su. He must have his reasons for doing this. Frost also nodded. Let's just do it, since it's already decided. And it seems that the hierarch of the Hustlers sect is also nearby. We should get to see what kind of person he really is. Wait, shouldn't we move a bit outward? Given that this place is close to those two gods' sons. Someone remarked, frowning. If a battle erupted and angered these two frightening beings, not just them, but even the Hustlers sect, this late-arriving hierarch might face the wrath and hostility of the two gods' sons. That would truly be the end. After all, the Hustlers sect, even though Bai Yilan frequently praised it, they weren't fools. Anyone with clear eyes could see that the Hustlers sect was just a fledgling group, starting from nothing, which was also why they were willing to join, to share in the initial stakes, striving together, starting from scratch. But if they angered the gods' sons, their first day joining might also become the day they were forced to disband, scattering to pieces. There's no time left. A minute didn't last as long as one might think. Bai Yilan looked up and noticed some movements there. In a few more seconds, they saw 3 individuals, rapidly flying through the sky. Bai Yilan immediately recognized Su Chi in the middle. Brother Su. Then he saw Nancy. Senior Nancy is also here. And another person beside them, though not known, must be strong, bursting forth with tangible spiritual energy. Another formidable character, seemingly a new ally of Brother Su. A joy of reunion flashed across Bai Yilan's face. The hierarch of the Hustlers sect. Damn. Finally back online. But this joy did not last long, because, the next moment, they saw tiny specks the size of ants in the distance, about a kilometer away. Approximately 30 people. Are those the 30 people mentioned? You asked with some surprise. So they are being chased. Asking us to cover their retreat? Some showed slight displeasure, considering they had just decided to join and were immediately being used as pawns. Yet Frost, you, and Bai Yilan had already drawn their weapons. No matter what, whether being used as tools or proving our loyalty, let's do it first. Also, Brother Bai, quickly tell that hierarch, you softly said, to not go any further forward. Ahead lies the territory of God's sons and many powers meeting point. The rage there was not something they or the Hustler sect could endure. Bai Yilan nodded seriously. Rest assured, everyone. I believe Brother Su must have his reasons for doing this. He won't let us. He was about to say he won't let us end up in deep trouble. But he suddenly choked back his words, remembering the numerous dangerous situations that always involved Brother Su. Start now. Although those 30 people hadn't yet arrived, their speed was extremely fast, not ordinary by any measure. Let's not use full force. Frost spoke softly. We just need to block them, not strike them down too severely. It wasn't out of arrogance. Although they were in a sorry state, their strength was still considerable. Each had their own trump cards and their numbers were about 100. 30 people. They shook their heads, wondering how they could possibly need 100 people just to block. Boom! Their myriad strength burst forth concurrently, heading toward the area behind Su Chi. The 30 divine sons watched coldly. They have comrades? With such strength, are they underestimating us? Weak ants. Be gone. The next moment, all the strength that had just intercepted them disintegrated in an instant as only a few divine sons made their move. Frost and the others were taken aback. Wait, although they hadn't used their full strength, nor had everyone acted together, it was just 3 or 4 people on the other side who had easily disintegrated their interception. Wasn't that a bit odd? Wait! Everyone attack! Frost did not hesitate for a moment. These 30 individuals seemed no ordinary. They were true powerhouses. Since that was the case, they naturally had to show their real strength. All 100 people made their move, and this astounding wave of energy created a powerful fluctuation. It made the entire air vibrate crazily, and also drew the attention of others around them. Many furrowed their brows slightly. However, this interception merely made the expressions of the divine sons even colder. Annoying insects! Their strength was even greater. With a simple gesture, they continued to tear through everything that was thrown at them. At this point, Frost seemed to finally realize something was wrong. Wasn't the opposition too strong? They were nothing like what they had imagined. And at this moment, Su Chi had already appeared in front of them with a smile. Gentlemen, you can't kill anyone like that. The internship tasks of the Hustlers sect aren't that simple. If you don't use your full strength, you might not even be prepared. You are being hunted. Frost took a deep breath. Hunted? Su Chi smiled. This is a trial. He didn't move forward but looked at the gazes cast upon him and smiled slightly. Don't you want a stage? I will give each of you a real grand stage, bigger than you can imagine. And this is the first step onto that grand stage. Su Chi's words made each of them furrow their brows tightly. A stage? A real grand stage? What does that have to do with these 30 people? And the next moment, you suddenly looked up. Something's off. How? These 30 people. Their identities seem off. Everyone looked up as the 30 or so people drew nearer, and they too sensed something off about them. That aura on them. Why does it resemble divinity so much? The word resemble doesn't seem quite accurate. Frost widened his eyes. They're divine sons. They're all divine sons. Did we just attack the divine sons? Brother Su, what exactly is going on? Bai Yilan couldn't help but shout. Su Chi did not respond but said softly, if you want to become members of the Hustler sect, you must have the courage to contend with powerful enemies. I highly doubt you have that courage. And also, can you stop them? Someone was about to say something when you suddenly held out a hand to stop him, just calmly looking at Su Chi, watching his smile. Then, he slowly turned towards the group of divine sons. Kill! The word fell. Frost, with a solemn expression, exclaimed, everyone, go all out. Divine sons, right? We'll show you our interception. In that instant, everyone's momentum didn't weaken, but instead burst forth with various truly powerful strengths. Boom! Terrifying fluctuations surged towards the 30 divine sons. Thunderous booms. Terrifying strength burst forth, targeting over 30 divine sons in unison. This was everyone's full-powered strike. The astonishing aura instantly drew the attention of all those nearby. It naturally could not escape the notice of the two gods' sons currently within the gate. Nancy watched this scene. Is this all you're doing? Fate doesn't need to be arranged, Su Chi said lightly, marking a difference between himself and the traveling merchant. I prefer to go with the flow. Boom! The force unleashed by over 30 divine sons was not so simple. The Meteor Alliance members deployed their full strength, with a dominating burst of numbers. But the divine sons merely watched the spectacle with cold indifference. The weak are the ones who overestimate themselves the most. How many times does it take to prove the correctness of the phrase, overestimating one's abilities? Over 30 divine sons, with utter coldness, stretched out their hands. Their very divinity even congregated above the sky dome, forming astonishing visions. Terrifying spiritual force erupted from their bodies. Kong! Every ear rang with the stunning explosive sound of the air bursting. The divine sons acted in unison, blocking all interception efforts with sheer force. Good news! This time they weren't torn apart instantly. After all, everyone had struck together, and each had unleashed their greatest strength. Bad news. It only lasted 5 seconds. Boom! A massive collapse in spiritual energy sent out shocking ripples. But it was not over. The coalition was still relentless. Various tools, daring, and abilities continued the onslaught. Nancy's eyes sharpened. So these fellows were indeed very strong. While not on par with the divine sons, they stood out among the sequencers she had seen. Regrettably, they were up against the terrifying divine sons. "So, what do you plan to do next?" Nancy asked, almost throwing in the towel. As nothing could shock her more than learning she had to take part in the confrontation with the abyss. How much worse could things get? "Well," Su Chi spread his hands. "I haven't decided yet." Nancy gaped. "Don't tell me you haven't figured it out. Aren't you always the one with various plans, dark schemes, cunning enough to prepare your next move?" "Su Chi, why would you slander me for no reason? Besides..." He paused, looking behind. Seems like someone can't sit still anymore. Right then and there, the strength erupted by the divine sons increased in intensity. When they took things seriously, not even so-called powerful adventurers could compare. The blood of the gods was no ordinary matter. The terrifying visions coupled with the breathtaking divinity and the barely contained rage of each divine son completely obliterated the coalition's intercepting momentum. The farce must end. A blinding fluctuation. The divine son's spiritual energy at that moment wiped out all interceptions in unison. The fighters' faces paled. They had all made their utmost effort, but their adversaries were divine sons, beings who stood at the pinnacle of creation, the untouchable heaven's chosen sons with the blood of the gods. The gap between them couldn't be closed by merely bursting forth in anger. Boom! Their expressions were cold and detached, as their respective powers, at that moment, converged into a beam of light that destroyed everything in its path and charged towards the coalition. Utterly lethal. The coalition even felt a threat of death at that moment. But the very destruction that seemed unstoppable left their spiritual energy briefly out of control. Such was the price of intervening. "I'll do it." Nancy couldn't just watch everyone die. After all, he was also a Sequence 6 powerhouse. "I don't know if I can hold it." His expression was grave and solemn. This was no ordinary attack, but a combined strike from over 30 divine sons. But at that moment, Su Chi placed his hand on Nancy's shoulder. "Big Star, it's not your turn yet." "You mean to say you..." Nancy was full of doubt. Su Chi smiled softly. He pointed forward with his hand. Without much turbulence, but in the next moment, the entire space violently shifted. That deadly combined divine son's attack, at this moment, unexpectedly redirected. Then uncontrollably, it headed towards the area where the two gods' sons were. "Damn it! What are you trying to do?" Many forces changed their expressions. Seeking death. They all dodged aside, no one daring to face it head-on. Eyes lifted in fury, staring at the one responsible for this deed, Su Buxian. Nancy's eyes widened. Damn it! Another enemy made. And... He suddenly widened his eyes, pupils shrinking. "Don't..." Ah! At that moment, the attack was heading toward the place where the two gods' sons were staying. In just a breath's time, the gate and the walls around it were reduced to dust. And yet, its momentum didn't stop there. It continued to burst into the only pavilion in the courtyard. The entire courtyard was blown open. Such fearsome might had reached the threshold of Sequence 6. And at that moment, click! As if a pause button had been pressed. A spear calmly met with the combined horrific force. No clamor, no explosion. A person with an eye on his forehead calmly watched the unfolding scene. Noisy. Too noisy. Su! With a soft utterance, the terrifying force that had demolished everything on the ground, from afar to here, whimsically contracted into a sphere at that moment, as the spear tip lightly poked it, reducing it to fragments. Everyone watched this scene in shock. Even the divine sons halted their bodies solemnly, their faces showing extreme fear. Heavenly Court. Yang Jian. This was a battle maniac with an unparalleled terrifying talent among the Heavenly Court divine race, the most likely successor to the highest position in the Heavenly Court. Yang Jian slowly looked around, eyeing both the Heavenly Dome divine sun and the people below, his gaze as piercing as a torch, bearing an unfathomable brilliance that no one could hide from. You! Did you do that on purpose? His gaze finally rested on Su Qi. Su Qi spread his hands. Sorry, I slipped. He then pointed at the divine sons nearby. But that attack came from them. I think it's only fair that you deal with them first. The divine sons' expressions darkened. Yet their pride wouldn't allow them to shift blame like Su Qi did. Moreover, some had a glint of excitement in their eyes as they licked their lips and even felt a surge of combativeness watching Yang Jian from a distance. Yang Jian calmly watched this scene. You're all too noisy. He lifted the tip of his spear, and his calm voice echoed to everyone's ears. My friend is in seclusion, and you might disturb him. So regardless of the reasons, I'm going to send all of you off. Su Qi then smiled at him. How will you send us off? One shot. The tip of his spear he lifted seemed to swirl like a mini black hole. Those who withstand it will be sent far away. Those who can't, best of luck to them. The divine son's expressions sunk further. Such arrogance. Even though the speaker was the son of the heavenly court divine race, they were no lesser beings. Such belittling words only sparked greater indignity in them. Upon these words, a terrifying spiritual force burst from Yang Jian. It even triggered a natural phenomenon. A horrific storm erupted, continuously shaking around Yang Jian as the center, sweeping across everything before him. The top forces members and Taoist guardians all started to pale, hurriedly retreating far from Su Qi and the others. They had come to seek allegiance, not to get involved in such disasters. Within mere moments, they had retreated a great distance. But the divine sons did not retreat, as there was ever no possibility of retracting their spiritual force. At this moment, they also felt a mix of anger and readiness to fight. Their spiritual forces collided but did not tear through each other's as expected, but instead exploded with a loud boom. They couldn't suppress it. How can there be such terrifying spiritual force? Nancy clenched her teeth, her face pale, clearly affected, while Achang beside her was even more severely affected, his body trembling and his spirit shaken, his eyes bloodshot. Looking around, even though they were at a considerable distance, many still went white-eyed and fainted. Such was the deterrence of the terrifying spiritual force. Moreover, they were right in the epicenter. Both parties' spiritual forces were impacting them. Nancy, as Sequence 6, was already breaking out in cold sweat. Su Buxian, you've really screwed it up now, haven't you? Not yet. Su Qi was not affected by these terrifying spiritual forces at all. Look, their target isn't on us right now, that's a good thing. And most importantly, they're about to start fighting. Nancy gave a thumbs up. Then you're seriously impressive. But have you considered one problem? We're freaking caught in the middle. Frost, you, and others had already realized and were shouting, let's go. Go. We need to leave. The other side didn't care. Completely, because once they started to fight, the first to be killed would be them, caught right in the center of the two forces. The Meteor Alliance, including Nancy and Achang, all wanted to flee, but the terrifying wave of spiritual energy had already erupted. It was too late. At that moment, Yang Jian's spear tip gently tapped in the space, from which an endlessly dazzling cold light burst forth. This strike seemed as if it could pierce through the Star River itself, causing the ground to shake thunderously. And a massive iceberg was instantaneously formed and sealed everything. A huge iceberg appeared directly from the tip of a spear. Damn it! Exclaimed someone from the Meteor Alliance, their eyes wide open. They actually smashed an entire iceberg towards us. And it didn't stop there. Those were merely snowflakes blooming atop it. Any place they touched was instantly twisted and shattered. This is the power of a god's son. Yu and Frost had an indescribably shocked expression in their eyes. At this moment, they truly felt an overwhelming helplessness. Such a gap. How could they possibly bridge it? Boom! At this moment, all the divine sons took action together. They knew that the power of each individual alone probably couldn't contend with a god's son. But don't forget, there were 30 divine suns present. The terrifying power they unleashed. Could it really be inferior to just one person? Their powers merged into one, forming crisscrossing forms of spiritual energy, and the power they burst forth formed a mountain-like spiritual energy shockwave. This place was already completely different from what it was when they had arrived. It was about to be completely reduced to desolation. Almost all members of the Hustlers sect are here, right? We're about to be annihilated, shouted Nancy. Su Buxian, what cards do you have up your sleeve? Stop hiding them. If we don't run now, it'll be too late. She still looked towards Su Qi at this moment. After all, having known Su Buxian for a long time and having suffered many losses, she absolutely didn't believe that Su Qi had no preparations. This guy had put himself into a dangerous situation. He definitely had some means to help everyone escape from here. And at this time, Su Qi also stretched out his hand. No, both hands. One hand slammed onto the fearsome iceberg. The other hand pressed directly onto another terrifying sphere of bursting spiritual energy. At this moment, whether it was the crowd watching from a distance around them or by Yilin and Nancy, everyone's eyes widened abruptly, and the expressions of the many divine suns changed drastically. How can this be? Su Qi, however, didn't look at them but gently spoke to the group behind him. Congratulations. You have now completed the intern mission and officially become members of the Hustlers sect. Now we start the sect hierarch's guidance class. 100 things the members of the Hustlers sect should know. The first one is, always trust the sect hierarch. The second principle, always remember the 8 major tenets of the Hustlers sect. The third one, base your actions on the codes of the Hustlers sect. The fourth one, the hierarch doesn't like goat head specimens, but they can be braised. Fifth, Nancy's eyes widened. Stop prattling. Can you remove these 2 ticking bombs first, and then continue the class? And besides, is there anything nutritious in what you're saying? All right, said Su Qi calmly. Then let's skip directly to those important principles and say something less crucial. That is, as Su Qi held back the 2 most terrifying forces, he said, as a member of the Hustlers sect, you need to have the courage to stand against the world. Nancy's eyes widened. But we don't want to stand against the world. No worries. The sect hierarch will help you. The next moment, under the watchful eyes of every member of the Hustlers sect, Su Qi redirected the 2 terrifying forces, directly smiting towards the divine suns and Yang Jian. Not just that, Su Qi also raised his hand and unleashed 2 additional bursts of spiritual energy. No frills, just pure spiritual energy. Yet he instantly amplified the 2 impacts several-fold. Not only did it surprise the divine suns, but even Yang Jian furrowed his brows sharply. Not only could he perfectly control their power, but he could also integrate flawlessly. This guy, who exactly is he? No matter who he is, the most pressing issue now is to deal with the attack that's been thrown at us. Meanwhile, some divine suns were glaring in anger. It's just a transformation object or transplanting skill. And you dare to make a move against us. They are knowledgeable, even though it seems the opponent managed to withstand the terrifying attack from both sides and even turned the force against them. But in reality, they didn't sense much spiritual energy fluctuation, indicating the opponent possesses special items or abilities to evade it. As for why they speculate this way, it's because, as divine suns, they also have many mechanism-type abilities or items. However, to achieve such powerful mechanisms, it comes at a high cost, usually used as a trump card. At this moment, all the divine suns struck together, and with such a powerful burst, they wouldn't dare to be arrogant. After all, everyone has their own trump card. But in this moment, their eyes suddenly trembled, because a bizarre domain had unconsciously enveloped them. Though the strange force didn't entirely lock them down, their spiritual energy suddenly stalled. And then, they were completely taken over by a terrifying iceberg. Boom! Frost raised his head, shockingly watching the explosion of force erupt before the divine suns, as over 30 terrifying divine suns were frozen into the mountain. everything stagnates. The divine sun's expressions remained frozen as they were struck. The surrounding people watched in astonishment at the scene, unsure of what happened, only seeing this force erupted before the divine suns, who suddenly didn't resist much, just like being stunned, and got frozen by ice. Should one say it's the strength of the god's sun, or that young man who controlled the two attacking forces is awesome? No. Boom! Another explosion sounded in the ears of everyone. Everyone quickly looked into the distance. At this moment, Yang Jian trembled more, seemingly taken by surprise. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, and the next moment, his whole body was sent flying, crashing into the pavilion behind, disappearing amidst the ruins. Everyone's eyes trembled. Both sides were suppressed? What on earth is going on? Su Qi clapped his hands. See, isn't it all settled now? The people of the Hustler sect couldn't recover their expressions for a long time. Shocked, bewildered, with traces of ripples. Frost took a deep breath, once thinking the divine suns and God's sun were towering existences. But now they've all hit a snag. Seems Brother Bai was right. The sect hierarch is indeed extraordinary. Frost suddenly paused, as he looked towards Bai Yilan, only to find the latter's expression was the same as everyone's. So you're also shocked, huh? Nancy's expression also showed shock, but more restrained. After all, he had already witnessed the interaction between Su Buxian and the bell ringer, and to confront the abyss, this guy surely has some ability. But this ability turned out even stronger than he imagined. However, you're powerful. Why provoke a bunch of divine suns? And the reputed future main stage God's Son? Nancy just prepared to speak. All right, you should go outside the arena now, Su Qi suddenly said with a light laugh. Boom! At this time, a distant loud commotion sounded. A figure appeared without even leaving a shadow, just with fierce battle intent erupting with a roar. Terrifying spiritual force shot skywards, even darkening the sky dome. Su Qi casually snapped his fingers. The surrounding space rotated, instantly pushing the Hustler sect's people thousands of meters away, to the same range as plenty of other forces. Bang! And with Su Qi's other hand, he held a dagger, blocking the spear tip bursting with golden light. Its flames flickered like ribbons around it. Su Qi's hand remained unmoved, and in front of him stood Yang Jian, holding the charge posture. The third eye flashed, pouring out even more immense strength, his entire being covered in golden light, now resembling a heavenly god. With calm eyes he looked at Su Qi, looking at his hand blocking his spear tip. How did you manage that just now? Su Qi chuckled lightly. The Hustler sect, although offering QVA service, one rule is, never for free. I understand. Yang Jian replied calmly. When I suppress you, then it counts as payment. Su Qi didn't reply. Yang Jian didn't move either. But his spiritual force, spiritual energy, and divinity on him were all merging, erupting terrifying might. Just like an airplane engine now from preheat to frenzied turbo rotation, terrible energy was concentrating, seeming about to erupt. Countless people watched this scene, swallowing hard. What terrifying power. Turns out the recent attack on the Divine Suns wasn't Yang Jian's full force. As for Su Qi, he appeared even calmer, showing no spiritual force, yet unaffected. Su Qi wore a smile. Though neither moved, the confrontation had already begun, with spiritual energy madly crashing, producing terrifying ripples between them. Actually, what I did just now was quite simple. Using the traits of a ping-pong paddle, absorbing and releasing energy, deflecting the two forces, and then using the skill silence of all things, causing them to be affected by silence. But due to being divine sons, endowed with divinity for shelter, the impact was minimal, easily noticeable and avoidable when prepared, yet in the blink of an eye none reacted, and even a slight impact was enough for a huge flaw. Using the simplest expenditure, let both sides be directly suppressed. Of course, Yang Jian's strength is very strong, exceeding my expectations, completely different from the God's Son met before, simply a natural god of war. And at this moment, the huge iceberg sealed by the sky dome also began to show cracks. Within a few breaths, boom! The entire huge iceberg was shattered. More than 30 divine suns, each with an extraordinarily terrifying aura. A large number of abnormalities appeared, and all kinds of spiritual energy and bloodline were fully activated. Each person glared angrily, coldly furious, and exuded an incredibly shocking and majestic force from their bodies. Now, they really used their true strength. At this very moment, their eyes also turned to Su Buxian and Yang Jian below, whose standing place had already shattered into pieces. Everyone was filled with battle spirit. The spiritual energy surged through them, but they didn't make a move. What to do, Brother Bai and Lord Nancy? He is about to be besieged. Lin said solemnly. He was also a bit solemn. Our strength doesn't seem to be enough at all. Nancy looked silently. The disaster he brought upon himself. He has to resolve it himself. He thinks Su Qi must have some backup plan, although he can't figure it out or be certain about it. But there must be. And at this moment, the divine sons haven't made a move yet. Yang Jian and Su Buxian's strength was only colliding in spiritual energy at this stage, not yet fighting in a true sense. However, a booming explosion sounded from the broken pavilion in the distance. A multitude of star rings appeared, shimmering. Everyone turned their gaze over. Amidst these star ring phenomena, a totem wrapped in a vast amount of divinity appeared. The totem of infinite divine star. Some forces instantly recognized this totem. Even the many divine sons' eyes froze, deeper fear in their eyes. If it's Yang Jian from the heavenly court, although his personal combat capability and terrifying talent make them somewhat afraid, it actually ends there. Because the heavenly court has declined, many heavenly gods have fallen in the war against the abyss, rather than saying Yang Jian relies on the heavenly court. It's more like the heavenly court relies on Yang Jian, the strongest descendant of the heavenly court in countless years, who can rejuvenate the heavenly court's glory and take charge once again. But Infinite Divine Star is different. It's a super divine country with numerous outer gods residing. The largest comprehensive force of the chaotic camp, not participating in the battle between the gods' palace and abyss, but its terrifying power cannot be ignored. And that terror, the lord of the divine country, who gathers countless outer gods, has only birthed one offspring in countless years. They watched the pavilion as their eyes trembled. A figure was slowly manifesting, sitting cross-legged among the star rings. With a truly majestic aura, various twisted changes appeared on him. This is the offspring, Bei Shenxing. At this moment, this legendary god's son, his state is quite abnormal. Sitting cross-legged within, his upper body kept changing. Like having convulsions, many afterimages appeared. The divine sons no longer moved but watched this scene solemnly, with dread. He's breaking through the sequence. About to step into sequence 6. How could it be? With the remnants of strength from the past withered world tree, the restriction still exists. How could he possibly break through? The divine sons could still feel the restriction here. Even though it's steadily weakening over time, it's definitely not something that can be crossed now. Yet Bei Shenxing in front is actually breaking through. They couldn't believe it no matter what. Yang Jian watched this scene. Instead, his emotional waves surged. His calm face showed excitement. He succeeded. Succeeded. Su Qi's voice came. Seems like you've always been looking for a chance to break the restriction, to break through to sequence 6, or perhaps he has some special ability that can cross the barrier? Yang Jian looked at Su Qi, pointing and commenting, calmly lowering his gun point. You don't want to know the answer anymore. Su Qi looked at Yang Jian as his battle spirit gradually faded. Yang Jian didn't respond but softly said, You're not leaving yet? My friend. Breaking through to sequence 6, his strength will undergo earth-shattering changes. Haven't you seen that group of divine sons has already started thinking about retreating? Su Qi smiled faintly. But they haven't retreated, have they? They seem more concerned about your friend's secret on breaking the restriction than retreating. You seem to be as well. Yang Jian's gunpoint gleamed with golden light again. He had already discovered that the opponent was not simple during the confrontation with Su Qi, very not simple. His spiritual energy was deep as a sea, bottomless. Yet he carried no spiritual force nor divinity, but still remained unaffected by Yang Jian's influence. The opponent was someone he couldn't see through, but if the opponent wanted to peep into his friend's secret, he naturally had to fight. No rush, I'm curious too, but don't want to take action, Su Qi said lightly. Because he will tell me himself. At this moment, the Divine Son's eyes were fixed ahead. After breaking through Sequence 6, it will inevitably trigger the backlash of rule restrictions. They remained to see what exactly would happen and what kind of traces and clues would be left. Bei Xinqing's convulsions became more severe, various afterimages faster and more numerous. In the next moment, the star ring suddenly expanded, originally centered around the pavilion, now directly covering the surrounding sky dome. The immense star ring seemed to drag everyone into the universe's most mysterious, most chaotic place. Infinite divine star. Breaking through to Sequence 6 actually causes these kinds of movements from celestial phenomena. Su Qi watched this scene, rubbed his chin, and said. Yang Jian calmly said, "This often correlates with one's sequence and bloodline. Possessing extraordinary strength naturally wouldn't be simple during a breakthrough." He looked at Su Qi. "So, which divine race do you come from?" A person like Su Qi is definitely not simple. Only a god's son can fight against another god's son. A talent emerging from the lower world is like a grain of sand breaking through the atmosphere itself, traveling within the universe. Su Qi didn't deny it, and instead said, "God Buxian." Yang Jian slightly raised his eyebrows. In his mind, there was no memory related to God Buxian. Is it yet another hidden special divine race? Never heard of it? Then that's right. Su Qi said with a faint smile. It's not a bloodline-based family-style divine race, but a divine country of the hustlers, gathering numerous individuals with belief and pursuit, based on the hustler's manual, dedicated to creating all good, and charging. Yang Jian. Okay. A voice slowly came. Stop fabricating stories. Moreover, a figure slowly landed. Bei Xinqing's figure had already entered everyone's sight, with a shocking aura, looking around. Get out of here. With a single word, the entire bodies of the Divine Sons started undergoing strange changes. Some hands turned into brooms. Some hair turned into snakes. Others' lower bodies turned into cars. This wasn't an illusion, but neither was it reality. It's the terrifying power brought by Bei Xinqing's sequence domain. Of course, the Divine Sons' faces turned grave, and the divinity on their bodies exploded, destroying these changes fiercely, restoring their original state. Go! This is his domain. All that needed to be seen has been seen. The restriction is about to lift. Prepare to break through to Sequence 6. The Divine Sons quickly retreated. Countless people in the distance watched this scene, their scalps tingling. This is the Sequence 6 of a God's Son. Just a gaze can change the Divine Sons' bodies. Terrifying ability. And at this moment, the numerous star ring phenomena that just appeared hadn't been withdrawn. Bei Xinqing's gaze slowly settled on Su Qi.